Hey everyone, how are you all doing? Welcome to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Naruto was saved by Anko, and he started to live with her, harem, part 2. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic, the Pyroman. Link is in the description. Also subscribe if you enjoy the video. Let's start the story. Naruto was the happiest person in the ninja world at the moment. He had just gained a new friend, and a new mother all in the same day. He now had a friend to play around with, and a mother that was all his. He finally had people other than the Hokage, and the Uchiha family that cared for him, and he couldn't be happier. Anko was happy as well. Naruto's smile and attitude were infectious, and made everyone around him feel better. She was happy because he was happy. His life was finally going to get better. The two walked in relative silence, as the boy was too excited to even speak at the moment. All he could do was walk forward, and smile like a maniac. He squealed, and jumped around, but didn't speak. His hand was in hers, as they walked side by side, not caring about any of the people glancing at them with hate. Most of the looks were actually out of curiosity, not of anger. They had heard about how Anko killed the guy the other night while protecting Naruto, and they were a little more afraid of the two of them now. It was rather quiet between the two of them, as they walked through the streets, but that all ended when Anko stopped, and looked at Naruto. "When was the last time you ate, Gaki?" she asked the boy. He was quiet for a moment, but spoke back to her after thinking for a few seconds. "A few days later, I think," he said back to her, as he tried to remember, getting her to look at him curiously. "A few days, but you've only been in the hospital for one. Before the villagers got you, how many days has it been since you last ate?" She rephrased her question, hoping to retrieve a better answer from Naruto. "So today is Thursday, and I was in the hospital Wednesday. 3 days. Not with Wednesday," he said happily, knowing that it was the right answer. Anko looked at him with worry. "You haven't eaten in 5 days? Gaki, we need to get you something to eat. Now," she ended with confidence, easily picking him up, and placing him on her shoulders to get to her favorite dango shop. It was only a matter of seconds before they reached their destination, and Anko put Naruto down on the ground. She knew that he could have ran with her to the shop, but he hadn't eaten in days, and he was probably at least a little tired from running ever since he woke up. Naruto looked at his surroundings, and then to Anko, his face asking for answers. "Where are we?" he asked her. "My dear Gaki," Anko paused to put a hand on Naruto's shoulder, "is the home of the greatest food in existence. Dango," she said happily, getting an odd look from Naruto, who shook his head at her. "No, ramen is the best food," he spoke back defiantly. Anko snorted, and began to laugh, even tearing up a bit. "Ha! Ramen? It's good, kid, but not as good as dango." Naruto shook his head again, and somewhat glared at her. "Ramen is the food of the gods. Uchiha said so. Trust me, Naruto. When you taste dango, you'll agree with me." Anko spoke confidently, fully believing that dango could calm the mightiest of beasts, and the largest of hunger. "Just try Gaki," she continued, leading Naruto into the dango shop, and over to the counter. It was a little store, but the size of the place didn't mean anything. Many people said that they sold the best dango in Konoha, and Anko took that fact to heart, as the one proving it true or not. The snake mistress ordered a few sticks of dango. Half of it was going to Naruto, and the other half was for her. She was sure that he would change his tune about ramen being the best. The two of them sat down at a booth, and began to eat. Without fear or worry, Naruto took one of the dango sticks, and ate the dumplings. He caught Anko's expectant look, and nodded at her. "It's good," he said to her, getting her to celebrate due to the fact that she thought that she had gotten him to admit that it was the better of two foods, but not better than ramen. Her celebration stopped, and a look that would make the Kyuubi cower in fear appeared on Anko's face. Naruto was frozen in fear, and could only listen to what she had to say. "I'll let you have my dango." "My dango? And you still say that ramen is better?" she asked furiously. She hardly let anyone have a share of her dango. The least he could do was humor her for a little before saying that ramen might have been a little better than dango. "Well, that's fine, kid. Can't force you onto something," she said with a happy smile, ignoring the fact that she had just scared her new son shitless. She ruffled his hair, and smiled a little when he whimpered in fear. "Why, you're not going to kick me out or abandon me or anything?" he asked with uncertainty. His reaction caused Anko to look at him quizzically. "No, why would I do something like that? I mean, I took it upon myself to look after you, to adopt you, as and I plan on doing it," she said with confidence, and a warm smile. She was quiet for a moment, hearing that he was still whimpering a little in fear. She sighed lightly, taking in a small breath, as she looked at him with sympathy. "Listen, Gaki, I didn't mean to scare you. She paused, shrugging her shoulders. Well, maybe a little, but not to this extent. She got up from her side of the booth, and sat down next to Naruto, putting a hand on his shoulder, as she looked down at him with a smile. You think that ramen is better than that's cool. That just means that I have to try harder to get you to admit that dango is better, she said with joy, laughing a little in an attempt to make Naruto feel a bit better. Naruto smiled at his adoptive mother, and laughed along with her, taking another stick of dango not long after. The two of them had a good dinner, talking, and learning a bit more about the other. With Naruto, it wasn't all that hard to learn just about everything about him. He was a 6-year-old who lived off of ramen, and what the old Hokage gave him. It was saddening, and angering at the same time to hear about how the village treated Naruto. Anko knew how bad the village could be, but to hear every story from the boy who had experienced it all set Anko on a whole new level of hate for the village. Naruto learned about Anko, and how similar she was to him. The village didn't like her either, but she fought for the respect that she currently had, something that Naruto wanted to do. He wanted to fight, and earn the recognition and respect of the village. He wanted to show them that they were wrong in being so mean to him, that he wasn't the fox stored inside. He found out that something bad happened to her because of someone else that made most people in the village hate her, and he really felt like he could connect with his new mother. Currently, the fox and snake duo was on its way to Anko's, and now also Naruto's, home. He was still excited about living with Anko, but not to the same extent that he was before they had gotten dinner. So, what are we gonna do when we get home? Naruto asked, his face showing that he was trying to keep himself from getting tired. It was a pretty adorable sight, seeing the little boy tiredly looking up at Anko. Anko looked down at Naruto, and thought for a moment. Naruto was looking tired, and she didn't really have any plans for the moment. She had plans for the following day, but not right now. I don't know. She said quietly, continuing to think about how to spend the rest of the day. She took a glance at him, and nodded knowingly. Don't know, she repeated, walking forward, as they neared their house. Anko had a weird feeling, one that got increasingly more noticeable, as she moved closer to her house. She didn't know what it was, but decided to keep quiet about it. She was on edge though, making sure that she was prepared if it was someone who had plans on hurting her or Naruto. The feeling didn't go away, as they got closer, and just before Naruto could touch the door, Anko put her hand out in front of him, keeping him from getting to the door. She looked at the boy, who looked back at her in curiosity. Stay here, and keep quiet, she said quietly, slowly moving her hand to grasp the knob, and turn it. Naruto nodded at her, and watched, as she opened the door without making a sound. She whispered something inaudible to his untrained ears, but several snakes slithered out of the sleeve of her trench coat, and onto the ground, where they proceeded to slither around the house. Anko moved into the house, as well, and pulled out a kunai just to be safe. She knew who was there, and she wanted to know why. With a smirk, Anko moved to the dining room, where a figure was currently making some tea. Anko concealed the kunai, and walked over to the figure. So, you're starting to pick up my habit of walking uninvited, Anko said to the person, who was pouring the tea into 2 cups. The person nodded, knowing who it was because of the voice. It was dark in the kitchen, but that wasn't a problem for the two of them, and their ninja training. It seems so. You do it all the time at my house, so it was bound to happen here at some point. Tea? The person offered, holding one of the hot tea cups out to Anko. Anko took the cup of tea, and sipped the drink, sighing in satisfaction. She set the cup down on the table, and looked at the figure, keeping her eyes on the unmistakable red ones. It's a little dark, don't you think, Nai-chan? I didn't think you were into the darkness. Kurenai shook her head, smiling a little, as she sipped from her own cup. I'm not, but I didn't want to alarm you by leaving all of your lights on. Having just the kitchen light on would have also raised suspicion. Really, anything that I would have chosen to do would have brought up at least some suspicion. Anko flipped on the lights, keeping her eyes on Kurenai, as she moved back to her cup of tea. Yeah, but still, she smirked at her friend. Invading a friend's house when they aren't home is my thing. Why are you here? Kurenai was silent for a moment, going over her choice of words before speaking them out loud. Nothing much. You said that you had to do something earlier, but the sun's already set. I wanted to have a chat with you to see what was going on, but you weren't here when I came by initially. So I came back, and made some tea for when you came home. She explained herself to Anko, who listened quietly. Anko had a spark in her eyes, but it was only for a short moment before it went away, hidden in the confines of her mind. Oh, don't worry about it. She looked behind her in surprise, remembering that a 6-year-old boy was standing outside of her door, waiting for the signal to be let in. Oh, that's right. She turned back to Kurenai with a grin. You have to meet your new godson. Kurenai's eyes widened at this, looking at Anko with the same look of surprise. Before she could say anything, Anko spoke again. Naruto, come in here. False alarm, it's just Nai-chan. Naruto heard Anko call him from inside the house, and walked through the door, and closed it behind him. He walked around the house for a brief moment before finding the kitchen, his tired little mind struggling to stay awake. Kurenai turned to Naruto, as he walked into the kitchen, and he couldn't be any cuter at the moment. There were small bags under his ocean blue eyes, and his sun-kissed blonde hair was as spiky as ever. Kurenai didn't even want to start thinking about his whiskers. Everything about Asterisk he was just so cute. In an instant, Kurenai had the boy in her arms, hugging him, as tight as humanly possible. I'm going to be this adorable little boy's godmother? She asked excitedly, squeezing him even more than before. She didn't notice that Naruto was trying to break free from her iron grip. Anko-cousin, help. Naruto managed to get out, still trying to get away from this strange woman who refused to let him go. Eventually, Kurenai stopped suffocating him in a hug, and lifted him up so that she could see his face. She practically squealed at his little whiskers, and began to pet and stroke them. She was like a giddy teenager at the moment, which was highly unlike her. Naruto had never had someone touch his whiskers before, because if he had, he would have been prepared for the feeling that he got from his godmother touching them. Unconsciously he began to purr, and started to drift into unconsciousness. He was like an actual fox, snuggling into Kurenai, as she continued to pet his whiskers, which caused him to keep purring. It made him all the cuter in the mistress' eyes. Neither she nor Anko could believe how cute he was becoming, even as he drifted off to sleep. He purrs? Kurenai asked excitedly, and semi-rhetorically. With wide eyes and a shrug, Anko responded, I guess? I don't know, it's never happened before. In little time, Naruto fell asleep from the affectionate treatment from Kurenai, who wouldn't let go of him until Anko ordered her to do so. He needed to get some rest, and he would have a better sleep on a bed than in Kurenai's iron grip. Once he was put in Anko's bed, as it was the only bed in the house at the moment, Anko moved back to the kitchen where she continued to talk to Kurenai. So, you're really making me his godmother? Kurenai asked, unsure if her friend was actually being serious about that or not. Much to her enjoyment, Anko nodded. Of course, you're better mother material than I am, and I probably won't be able to raise him right without you, she said confidently, knowing that Kurenai would probably take the role of godmother, even if she didn't have the title. Thank you, Anko. You won't regret it, she said happily, thinking back on the adorable little boy she was going to be raising with her friend. And eventually the day ended, and Kurenai went home after going to Anko's room, and holding on to Naruto for a few minutes. Anko had to carefully pry Naruto out of Kurenai's arms so that he could continue sleeping, and a little while later she joined him in the bed. He slept on the far end of one side, and Anko took the other side. She knew that she'd have to get him a bed, and a room of his own, if they were going to be living together, but she was going to worry about that later. The next morning, a little boy woke up from what he believed to be the best and saddest dream of his life. He had been rescued from the villagers by a woman and her snakes, and was taken in by her. In the dream, he had also gained some friends, one of them being a girl a few years older than he is, and the other three being her dogs that followed her around. It was such a perfect dream, and it ended with meeting one more person, who was apparently now his godmother. As he woke up, he didn't bother to notice that his bed was much comfier and larger than before, not to mention that his room was entirely different, as well. He didn't take notice of the nearly naked woman sleeping next to him, as he was drowned in his own sadness because of what he believed to have been a dream, and not reality. He also didn't notice that he wasn't in his tattered clothes anymore, and only wore the trunks that he had on previously. As he woke up more though, he began to take note of all of the differences until it hit him, and a look of excitement spread across his face. He jumped in excitement, as he realized that it wasn't a dream, and he couldn't believe that he thought it was in the first place. He wasn't in his own home, because that wasn't his home anymore. He lived here with Anko now, and he couldn't be happier. He walked back to Anko's room, where he found the woman just as naked as he was in the bed. She seemed fairly peaceful, but was stirring just the slightest bit. Her hand covered the left side of the base of her neck, and she seemed to have been experiencing something bad in her dream. Naruto wanted to see what she was holding, but he didn't want to disturb her sleep. Before he could do anything else, he heard a knocking at the door. As it was still early out, and he wasn't fully awake yet, Naruto decided to get the door to see who was there. The little boy walked over to the door, and opened it, just before the person on the other side could knock again. The man on the other side of the door was well built, and much taller than Naruto was at the time. He had a bear-like physique, and wore a black trench coat, and a bandana-styled hutaite. He had 2 large scars going across his face, and a slightly surprised expression on his face. He was expecting Anko to be at the door, and not this little kid who lacked clothes. They were both quiet for a moment, taking in each other's appearance. Ibiki noted the seal on the boy's stomach, and knew who he was instantly. The village pariah, Naruto Uzumaki. He felt a little bad for the boy, but he still had questions about his presence. I know Anko usually likes them young, but he's a little too young for her tastes, Ibiki whispered under his breath, not worried that Naruto would be able to hear him or understand what he was saying. He then looked straight into the blue eyes of the little blonde boy in front of him. Do you know where Anko is? He asked calmly, trying to keep his interrogational tendencies at hand until he had a better understanding of the situation. Naruto nodded at him. He was a little scared of the giant man before him, but he needed to stay calm. Yep, she was still sleeping when I woke up, so I was careful to not wake her up when I left the bed. He was interrupted by Ibiki, whose face morphed into a slight scowl as he walked into the house, pushing Naruto out of the way in the process. He then turned around and shut the door before grabbing Naruto and practically throwing him on the couch. Naruto was scared now, but was too afraid to make a sound. I'm going to be quiet to keep her from getting up, but I don't need to raise my voice to get what I want out of you, Ibiki said coolly. He had to watch what he said to the boy. He was probably pretty mentally fragile because of the village, and he didn't want to add to that torture. What are you doing here? He asked in the same cool voice. Naruto was paralyzed in fear. This man was now truly scaring him, and Naruto could barely move or speak. One of his hands gripped his leg, and held on so tightly that his nails were digging into his skin, causing some blood to come out of his leg. He was young, but he knew that he could override his fear with pain. That was surprising to Ibiki. He didn't know that Naruto knew of that kind of technique, even though it was fairly common to do things like hurt yourself to overwrite fear in stressful missions or scenarios. What he did next, though, truly surprised Ibiki, and even scared him a bit too. The little boy shouted to the heavens, as loud as he possibly could. Anko Kazan! He yelled out during his brief moment of pain. His wound was nothing to a ninja, and it healed instantly. It closed, and repaired itself in a matter of seconds, just enough time for Anko to come flying out of her room, and into the living room with a kunai in each hand. She had awoken because of Naruto calling out her name, and she reacted in an instant, finding kunai wherever available at the time, and not worrying about clothes until after whatever was happening was dealt with. She lunged at Ibiki, who barely had any time to react, and was pinned on the ground with a kunai to his neck, and another to his wrist. He could easily pick her up, and move her aside, but he was still suffering from the shock of being thrown to the floor. Why are you here, and what the hell are you doing to me? Anko asked furiously, not recognizing Ibiki until a few seconds after speaking. She then smiled sheepishly, and got off of him, leaving the room with a quick 1 sec, before vanishing to her room. Because of what events had just happened in the last few seconds, Ibiki learned just what he wanted to know. It seemed within the last few days, 2, maybe 3 at the most, Anko adopted Naruto, and took him in, as her son. She was too busy with him to go to work for the past 2 days, and she was most likely so tired from the recent events that she slept in later, but was not sleeping heavily enough to ignore the loud screaming by her son. As she is a ninja, and a damn fine one at that, she reacted instantly at being called out during her sleep, and attacked the first person in sight through instinct alone. Ibiki stood up, and faced Naruto, who was still scared of the man. Ibiki nodded, and looked into his eyes. Sorry kid, he said plainly, trying to think of some better words to use. He was good with using words, and phrases that tore apart people, not putting them back together. Good thinking with clawing yourself, though. Didn't think you'd know that. He flashed him a small, and rare smile, sitting next to the boy. Anko took you in, he said, rather than asked, knowing that it was what was happening. The two of them sat in silence, waiting for Anko to come back. Ibiki had little to say because he felt like there was little to say in the situation. Naruto was just scared shitless. When Anko came back in, Naruto was the first one to speak, getting looks from both Ibiki and Anko. Why are all of your friends so weird? Naruto asked, getting looks from both of the adults in the room. Ibiki seemed unresponsive, but actually would have popped a vein if his emotions were seen on his face. Anko simply smirked at the boy. He'd have to get used to that weirdness, as there were hardly ever ninja who were plain and normal. That was what kept the job interesting. Pay him no mind, Ibiki. He'll learn. Anko said confidently, sure that her son will learn his lesson about calling ninjas like Kurenai and Ibiki weird. Anko sat down in between Naruto and Ibiki, and relaxed in her seat, as she glanced at the both of them. So yeah? I'm sorry for not checking in or anything, but, as you can see, my life has taken a bit of a turn. I have to cash in those days off so we can get settled living with each other, as well as get more food, and get him some new clothes. That jumpsuit of his looked like a one-size-fits-most, and he can't be wearing something like that out during missions. A little orange, but probably burnt or something to keep from getting too much attention. Ibiki nodded in understanding. He didn't have any kids of his own, but he treated Anko like a daughter, even if she was only a few years younger than he was. And what of high-priority events? If you know everything about the boy, like I'm sure you do, then you should know that he's probably going to be invited to several events in the future. He has to look good, as well. Make an impression. Yeah? Got it. We'll deal with that more when the Hokage tells the village. He's going to bring it up at a council meeting before telling everyone else. She cut him off. He didn't say anything about it, and he understood, but he still wasn't happy about it. Though, I do wonder how you know something like that, Anko said accusingly, wondering how Ibiki would know about Naruto's heritage. Ibiki smiled briefly, and looked at the boy. It should be easy to pin down that face, and his tendencies. Shikaku should have identified him, as soon as he laid eyes on the boy, Anko said accusingly, wondering how Ibiki would know about Naruto's heritage. Ibiki smiled briefly, and looked at the boy. It should be easy to pin down that face, and his tendencies. Shikaku should have identified him, as soon as he laid eyes on the boy. Anko nodded back at the master interrogator, and got up from her seat. They couldn't get what they needed while sitting down. Well, she said, as she stretched, we should get going. Come on Naruto, we're heading out. She then glanced at Ibiki, who was getting up, as well as she opened up the door. You can join us if you want. You could help bring down the prices if they seem too high. This got Ibiki to smile more, and nod, and the three of them left the house. After all, it was always fun to terrify the masses. Walking through the shopping district of Konoha, Ibiki, Anko, and Naruto were all looking at shops to visit. They had gotten the boy some practice weapons, including a sword by the suggestion of the cat Master Nbu, who was supposed to just be watching, not helping Naruto find the perfect blade to train with by going through every available sword, and picking out the best one that would suit him for the time being. The three of them had just left one of the top ninja gear and weapons stores with several outfits and weapons in their hands. It was called Higurashi Weapons, and was actually one of the few places that day where Ibiki didn't have to haggle with the store owner to lower the prices. He was a weapons expert, and knew a decent amount when it came to asterisk selling, so he understood Naruto's position, and allowed him to come into his store anytime. He seemed like a nice man, and even wanted to introduce Naruto to his daughter, who was out at the moment with her mother. Naruto made a note to come back there for weapons and things. Ibiki helped Anko pick out some outfits that were good for both missions and more formal occasions. It wasn't until minutes after leaving the store that they found Kurenai walking through the district, as well, seemingly on the lookout for something. Anko was the first to speak to her, getting her attention, as the group stood a little distance away. Kurenai? What are you doing here? Anko asked, curious about her friend's presence. Kurenai's head snapped in the direction of Anko, and looked at her with slight surprise. She currently had a somewhat large bag with her, that seemingly held several clothes that she picked out for herself. Oh Anko! It's good to see you, and Naruto. Hello Ibiki-san. Ibiki nodded at Kurenai in recognition before looking around. Kurenai's attention moved to Naruto, who was still looking at all of the cool ninja gear in the shop through the windows. Naruto-kun, can you come over here for a second? Naruto's attention was caught by Kurenai, as she called him by name, and the boy nodded before walking over to his godmother. Kurenai smiled, and reached into her bag, digging around for something. I'm out shopping because I wanted to surprise you with a few outfits. While they can be used for running around, jumping, and even training, they're more or less durable civilian clothes. A spark came into her eyes, and she moved her hand out of the bag, and grabbed Naruto's hand. Since you're here, we can try out all of these clothes that I got you, and I have to see the things that Anko and Ibiki-san got you, as well. Come on, she said happily, as she dragged Naruto, taking him into one of the stores so that they could go to a dressing room, and try out everything that he had gotten. To say the least, Naruto did not have a fun time. After they were done with all of the clothes, Naruto, Anko, Ibiki, and Kurenai all walked to the market to get food for Naruto and Anko. Anko had already shopped for food, but she wanted to go back to get some things that Naruto might have wanted that she didn't already have. The four of them all walked into the store, and began to walk around. They all followed Naruto, as he seemed to have an idea of what he wanted to get. What he did surprised everyone, but only to a certain extent. They had walked into an aisle, all following Naruto, and just watched with surprise, as he filled his entire basket with ramen cups. They waited until he was done before speaking. All ramen? Naruto, you know that you're going to have to eat other things, right? Kurenai asked, who simply got an odd look from the boy that she was talking to. It was like he didn't know that there were other foods that existed that were so much better and healthier than ramen. "No, I only eat ramen," he said happily, not realizing that all of that ramen was horribly unhealthy. Anko shook her head at her son. "No, Naruto. Ramen's good and all, but you can't be a good ninja on just that." Her words seemed to have hurt Naruto. "Are you saying that you don't eat dango all the time, Ka-san?" he asked her harshly, uncharacteristically for a child of his age. "Yes. That's exactly what I'm saying. Dango is delicious, dango is the best, but it isn't everything. If you had ramen every day, then you'd turn out short, malnourished, and incapable in a battle. It's good every once and a while, like dango, but it's not an everyday thing." Naruto pouted. He wanted to argue, he really did, but the large man with the scars and the crazy woman with the clothing were scaring him. He hadn't gotten to meet the scary side of Anko, so he wasn't afraid of her, at least not yet. He simply nodded, and put more than half of the ramen back on the shelf before returning to Anko and the rest of the group. She smiled at him, patted his head, and brushed her hand across his whiskers, which caused him to make a small sound that he wasn't prepared to make. He looked at Anko with a light scowl, and went to check out the few cups of ramen he had with him. He was going to cherish those, as he was sure that he wouldn't be having much. And he was right. The following day, the village was stirring quite loudly because of a certain snake mistress, and a certain blonde running all throughout the streets of. The boy in question was currently running for his life out of fear because his adoptive mother was chasing him with a grin that only a madwoman would wear. She had a kunai in each hand, and a spark in her eyes that made Naruto cower in fear. When Naruto was running from the ANBU the other day, he wasn't going his fastest because he knew it was just a game, but he was still trying so he could get out of the hospital. This was an entirely different scenario. Naruto woke up this morning by being scared by Anko, and then was fed a healthy and rather plentiful breakfast before getting down to grueling training. She wasn't going to put him in the forest of death, not yet. While Anko had said that he'd only be doing light training because of his age and experience, it was the worst thing that he had ever done. Anko promised Naruto that if he could outrun and outmaneuver her for most of the day, then she'd teach him something cool. Naruto weaved through the streets, being followed by a madwoman who seemed to have had the intent to kill him. The little blonde boy weaved through the streets, running into the onsen without hesitation. He went through a flash of hand signs, and transformed into a much taller being. It was a female version of himself, and a quite beautiful one at that. The disguised boy stayed at the onsen for a few minutes before walking out, and reverted back to his normal appearance. Only seconds later was there a figure behind him who was smiling at him with that odd and disturbing smile of his. Anko was impressed that he could do the henge, especially at his young age. She wondered how she could do it, but would ask him after she captured him, and put him in one of the interrogation chairs at TI. This exercise was to simulate being chased, as an actual ninja, and since he was just about to be captured, he would be interrogated. He'd have to hold up against her tactics that she reserved especially for him. She tapped the boy on the shoulder, and bent down so her face was right next to his. She whispered into his ear in such a way that scared him. "Gotcha. Ah crap. Oh make. Sexy time." How Naruto came to be. Naruto woke up with a rather quick start. He wanted to relish in the feeling of being half asleep, but the bright lights in his face kept him from dozing off. He had even tried to shut his eyes, as tight as possible, but it was of no use. Naruto attempted to move his hands in front of his face, but he couldn't do so because his arms were strapped into a chair, along with his legs. He struggled to get free, but nothing he could do would help in the situation. "So you're awake, Gaki?" a familiar voice asked him. He couldn't see where it was coming from, but he was sure that she was behind the bright light in his face. Naruto groaned, and looked down, trying to shield his eyes from the bright light. Anko laughed, turning down the intensity of the lights. "Alright Naruto, I won our little game of chase, and now you're going to be interrogated by me and Kurenai. Got it?" she asked seriously. While she was going to interrogate him like she would with a missing nin or criminal, she could only do so much because he was a 6-year-old boy. Naruto nodded, and looked at Anko, who was now visible because of the dimmer light. Anko smiled. "Good," she said, as she walked in front of the light, placing a dull kunai at his neck. "Now where did you learn that?" She demanded an answer from him, but was still going soft on the boy. Earlier that day, she had told him that when she captured him, he would be interrogated, and he would have to do everything that he could to keep himself from giving information to her. So of course, he was going to put up as much of a struggle as a stubborn boy could at his age. Naruto shook his head, and looked away from Anko. Of course he was scared because she had a kunai on his neck, but he was told to be strong and stubborn. "Nope," he replied back, getting Anko to realistically feign anger. Anko pushed the dull kunai further against Naruto's neck, and at this point he knew that it was too dull to cut someone using the amount of force she was currently using. It'd have to be sharper if she wanted answers from him. Anko looked behind her. "Kurenai," she called out, getting the red-eyed woman to step forward. "Put him under A. Give him your worst." Naruto was a little more scared now. Kurenai seemed crazy to him because she had almost strangled him when they first met, and assaulted him with clothes the day before. He could only wonder what her worst was, and took a small gulp in fear. Kurenai nodded at Anko, and did several hand signs, grinning when she saw her godson gulp in fear of her. She wouldn't use anything too scarring on him, something that would have affected him, and him alone. She had been told by Anko to go a little hard on him, but only so much. He was just starting out, and they couldn't use everything they had against him. She had been told that he could use the henge, but Kurenai hadn't seen it for herself. She wanted to, but only after this was done. She didn't say anything aloud, but the chakra that she flared signified that she was now active. Naruto's eyes went wide, and his body was still, as he experienced it. It was of Anko, Kurenai, Ibiki, Yugao, and Kakashi all sitting at Ichiraku ramen, and denying the boy food. To any normal person, this would hardly be anything, but these were people that Naruto knew, and liked, as friends, and they were denying him the ultimate food in existence. Moments later, Kurenai released them, and Naruto looked at his mother pleadingly. "I'll tell you anything, but don't say that I can't have ramen ever again, please." He rushed out, as he looked at Anko with obvious fear, and panic in his eyes and voice. Anko sighed. Kurenai was good at hitting Naruto in a place where it hurt his stomach, and it was going to prepare him by getting him to know that enemy shinobi would use any and all weaknesses against their opponents, but not letting Naruto ever have ramen again was a little much. The snake mistress then nodded, glancing at Kurenai, and silently telling her to undo the straps on his hands and legs. Kurenai nodded back, and did, as she was silently told, stepping back a moment after doing so. She watched, as Naruto got up, and attempted to block the boy from moving past her. Naruto tried to make a run for it, and got past both Anko and Kurenai, but he was stopped at the door where Ibiki stood. The bear-like man simply looked down at Naruto, and cast a cold glare at the boy, getting him to back up in fear before putting his hands together to make seals. He transformed into his female counterpart for Ibiki, and Kurenai to see, and transformed back a moment later. Both Kurenai and Ibiki were shocked to see such a beautiful woman take the place of Naruto, and assumed that there must have been more to the story than just that. Anko looked at the boy curiously, and put a hand on his shoulder. "How'd you learn that?" she asked him. "I was sneaking around a while ago, and I saw a guy make those with his hands. I did it, and I had an idea to use it to be someone else so I could buy things. The people like the pretty girls the best, so that's what I transformed into," he explained to Anko, Ibiki, and Kurenai. They were all both proud, and saddened by the fact that he had learned this just because he couldn't walk into stores looking like himself. Anko gave him a sad smile, and patted his shoulder. "You did good running, and you fared okay with the physical torture, but mental torture is what we have to work on. Ibiki and Kurenai can help you with that later. I say we get ramen to celebrate your first day of training, and after that I'll teach you something cool." The two of them walked out of the interrogation room with smiles on their faces. A day later, Naruto was on the run once again, but under slightly different circumstances. As before, he was being chased by Anko, but there was a twist. He had to avoid the needles that she was throwing at him. The thing that made Naruto scared beyond belief, however, was not he was afraid of the various poisons Anko dipped the needles in. There were only 3 of 4 that weren't poisoned, but neither of them knew which ones weren't. The boy had been scraped by a few needles during his run, and they were affecting him a little, but the fox and his own blood allowed him to become somewhat immune to the poisons over time. He just had to experience them in the same, and small doses every once in a while to build up the immunity to them. He also had 2 Saban needles in his back, but he still continued to run. Anko called it his immunity training, and it was just for Naruto and his abilities. She could have just given him the poison little by little without chasing him, but this also helped him in speed, maneuverability, and everything else he had gone through the day before. As the two ran through the village, Anko threw a few more Saban at him, making sure not to hit anyone other than the target she was aiming for. She could easily hit him every time, but she needed to make him feel like he did actually have a chance against her. A half hour later, Naruto's back was filled with Saban needles, and the boy was moving at a sluggish pace. Naruto was still struggling to move, as he wasn't going to give in and lose. He was going to beat these poisons, and still evade Anko. Fortunately for him, Kurenai was up ahead, and the boy put in more effort to move over to her and hide behind her. Kurenai looked at Naruto with shock and surprise. She took notice of all of the needles in his back, and quickly grabbed a hold of him to start carefully taking the needles out. It wasn't long before Anko came onto the scene, and looked at Kurenai with mass confusion. "Nai-chan, what are you doing?" she asked her friend, watching her glare back at Anko, as she pulled out the last of the needles. "Me?" she asked, already having an idea of what was happening. "What the hell are you doing?" The red-eyed beauty let go of Naruto, and poked a finger accusingly at Anko. Why does Naruto look like he's going to fall over when it isn't even past noon? Not to mention looking like a pincushion. Anko still looked at her confused. It should have been obvious what she was doing, or at least she believed so. "What does it look like?" she asked her. "Poison immunity training," she continued with a happy grin. "Anko, you can't be serious," Kurenai yelled. "He's 6 years old, and he's only been training for a few days. You can't do something like this to him this early on. His body isn't ready for it." Anko shook her head. "He'll be fine. That Uzumaki blood of his, and his tenant should make sure that he gets over the poisons pretty quickly." This made Kurenai groan. "He's still 6. Advantages or not, he isn't ready for something as strenuous as immunity training. Those hallucinogens will be absolute hell for the boy, and you gave him an unbelievably large amount of toxins of all kinds at the same time. He might heal fully in a few hours, but it'll seem like an eternity to him." She tried to bring Naruto into a hold, but he seemed to have moved from his spot before she did so. She looked at where he was in confusion, and this caused Anko to look around, as well. He wasn't anywhere near anymore, that was definite. He was only moving at a snail's pace when Kurenai found him, so he couldn't have gone far. "We need to find him." That was something they both agreed on. They had searched as much of the village as they could within a 30-minute period, and the two women eventually stopped to take a small break. They reunited at the dango shop, and the two of them looked at each other. "Alright, you're right. I should have waited a bit before putting him through that," Anko said in resignation. "A bit? Anko, I'm glad that you agree with me, but you shouldn't have started something like this until after he graduated from the academy. And how are you so calm about this? Your 6-year-old son Kami knows where, and you're looking like nothing happened." This got Anko to growl and glare at Kurenai. "I know he's in trouble. I know that he's somewhere in the village, and we can't find him. I know that he's going to have the worst time of his life, but I can't let that get to me." She practically yelled at her. "I know that I messed up, Kurenai, and I'm going to fix it, but I can't do that unless I'm calm, and I'm focused. When we find him, and take him back to my house, then I'll get all emotional." Anko then walked out of the dango shop, motioning for Kurenai to follow. She did, as such, and the two of them walked off to where the clan compounds were. "There will always be someone better than you, and I'm just trying to prepare him before his life goes off the deep end." The two quickly arrived at the Inuzuka compound, where Anko hoped to find one of two Inuzuka women. She didn't prefer one over another, as she was sure that either of them would be able to track the boy down. Anko knocked on the door, and waited impatiently, hoping for any capable tracker to open up the door. When the door did open, Anko was glad to see who was on the other side. A woman in her 30s opened up the door, and looked at the two women on the other side of the door. Like almost everyone else in the compound, she had the fawn-like markings of an Inuzuka, and a feral appearance to match. She knew both of the women who were at the door, and smiled slightly at them. "Ah, if it isn't Anko. Hana's been talking a lot about you, and your apparent son Naruto," she said, getting a much younger woman inside the house to become flustered. "Ka-san," Hana said in the background. Sam simply shook it off, and became serious. "You two look a little scared." "What's up?" she asked semi-casually, knowing that if Anko was in such a state, even if the signs weren't apparent to the normal eye and senses, it wasn't a good sign. "We'll talk later, but we need to track someone down. I'll owe you a favor afterwards, but we need to find him now," Anko said urgently, trying to keep a calm look, as she informed the Inuzuka matriarch. Sam arched an eyebrow. "Track who?" she asked. "Naruto." Kurenai spoke up, now getting Sam's full attention. She couldn't let something bad happen to the boy. "We'll definitely talk later," Sam said back. Her eyes narrowed, turning her head so she could look back into the house. "Hana, get your dogs, and go with Anko. She needs to track Naruto," she ordered, which made Hana nod, and called the triplets through whistling. Kurenai looked at Sam with curiosity. "I don't have any problems here, but why is she going, and not you?" she asked the older woman. Sam looked over at Kurenai, and glanced at Anko. Kurenai must not have been with Anko when Naruto went missing the first time around. The triplets are already used to Naruto, and his smell, from what I've heard from Hana. Her pups need practice, and in all honesty when they reach Kuramaru's age, they'll be just as good, if not better, when it comes to tracking. Kurenai nodded in understanding, and the three of them waited only a few seconds before Hana came running to the door, stopping next to her mother. The youngest woman in the group looked at Kurenai and Anko. "Hello, Anko-san. Naruto's missing again?" Anko nodded and sighed, looking down at the ground to avoid any eyes. "Yeah, I kinda rushed into his training, and now he could be anywhere, not to mention suffering like crazy because of the hallucinations." She muttered the last part, but it wasn't effectively quiet enough because Hana and Sim could hear her clearly. "Hallucinogens, Anko, what happened?" Sim said in a stern voice. She knew how hurt that boy was. If he started to hallucinate, only Kami would know what would start appearing in front of him. Anko sighed again, slowly looking up at Sim. "I put him into immunity training too early. His blood and tenet will keep him alive, and he'll get over the poisons and other things faster than most people. But that doesn't mean that he won't feel its effects any less." She paused and let the information sink in. It was obvious to the Inuzuka women that Anko regretted doing such a thing to her little boy, but was most likely not thinking fully at the moment, or didn't fully understand how harsh it would be for him. Sim was about to say something, but was stopped by Anko. "Scold me all you want later," she said in a calm, but firm voice, glancing at Hana before turning around. "We need to find Naruto first." Kurenai and Anko jumped away first, going slow enough for Hana to catch up before moving faster. They stopped at Naruto's old apartment again to get another whiff of his scent, as it was still pretty strong there, and then took off once more. Anko knew where they would be if they kept going in the direction that they were going in, and she hoped that Naruto wouldn't be found being in the jaws of some beast, or hitting the gates. Kurenai also had an idea of where they were going. She had been to Anko's personal playground a few times before, so she knew how to get there. It didn't take long, and the group eventually stopped when they were faced with a large chain gate blocking their path. Near the gate was a small hole that someone could probably go through if they were small enough or if they were Naruto's size. Anko looked at Hana. "Is he in there?" she asked, getting a nod from Hana, who kept her eyes on the dogs that were making their way through the hole near the gate. Anko stepped forward and unlocked the gate, motioning for them to move ahead. When everyone was inside, Anko closed the gate and continued to run with the group. It didn't take long for them to find Naruto, who wasn't all that far into the forest of death. When they stopped, the group saw a rather large black panther slowly making its way over to Naruto. Anko and Kurenai noticed the panther and decided to stay quiet. The cat didn't have any intent on eating Naruto, as it was moving far too slowly to have that sort of desire at the moment. It was watching Naruto, and soon enough the panther walked right over to Naruto and grabbed onto his collar by using its fangs. The two elder women couldn't let that panther get away, and threw a barrage of kunai at the cat, causing it to drop Naruto while it became injured, and ran off. "Naruto-kun!" Hana shouted in fear, as she dashed at Naruto, and caught the boy just before he hit the ground. He was cradled in her arms, as she rolled on the ground, stopping after rolling around a few times. When she stopped, she moved to a seating position, and examined the boy. By looking at Naruto's face, they could tell that he had been crying quite a lot, most likely from the hallucinogens that were in his body. He was whimpering quietly in his sleep, and he couldn't stop shaking. His suffering wasn't over yet, it seemed. Kurenai remembered how Naruto purred when she had first met him, and she wondered if that could calm him down now, in such a bad time for him. She glanced at Hana, who seemed to have been taking an interest in Naruto's well-being for the moment. He was a boy half her age that experienced things that she had yet to face. He was a brave kid, and she hoped that Naruto would make it through this okay. She looked up in surprise, and shook when she heard Kurenai speak. "Pet his whiskers," she said with a small smile, getting Hana to look at her with confusion, and, as if she thought Kurenai was crazy. The look on Kurenai's face told Hana that it was exactly what she had said, and now the older woman was silently encouraging Hana to do it. Slowly, and hesitantly, Hana moved one of her hands over to Naruto's face, and began to pet the whiskers on the left side of his face. The reaction she got from him was surprising, but relieving. He stopped shaking, and whining almost instantly, and began to purr softly in her arms. She was surprised, and continued to pet his whiskers, as she stood up, and began to walk out of the forest with Anko and Kurenai. As he was being lifted, Naruto's eyes opened a little, and looked at Hana, who was carrying him, and petting the marks on his face. "Angel," he said quietly, smiling at the blurry, but still strikingly beautiful girl holding him before falling back into unconsciousness. This caused Hana to blush, and Anko and Kurenai to look back at the two in curiosity. They wanted to make sure that he said what they thought he said. Anko and Kurenai walked side by side. Hana was holding on to Naruto so that the two of them could talk without worrying about waking the boy. Kurenai looked at her friend sternly. "I'm going to be Naruto's Jonin instructor when he graduates," she told Anko, who looked at her with confusion. "What?" Anko replied, unsure of why she was bringing up who his Jonin instructor would be. What are you talking about? Naruto's going to be on my team, and we'll have the best team in Konoha. Probably passed the Chunin exams as a rookie. She spoke confidently about her son. Kurenai shook her head. If it weren't for me, he'd be in the stomach of an animal right now. If you were his sensei, you'd take him, and his team on a B rank the day after graduation. I'm sorry, Anko, but I'm much better suited to be his instructor. The red-eyed mistress then smirked. And if you think otherwise, then we could just bring up you filling Naruto with poisons, and him getting lost to the Hokage. See what he thinks on the matter. Anko sighed, and grumbled, as she looked back at Hana and Naruto. Fine, she said to her friend, grumbling the next word that came out of her mouth. Mean it. Elsewhere in Konoha, Ibiki is a small restaurant near the outskirts of Konoha. It wasn't his absolute favorite place to eat at, but they had good food and good service. The scarred man looked across the table, and glanced at both of the shinobi in front of him. One Kakashi Hatake, and one Yugao Yuzuki. The two still had their uniforms on, but did not have their ANBU masks with them. Well, Yugao didn't have a mask on, but like always, Kakashi had his mouth, and eye covered by another mask, and his Hatake. I should ask, but I think I've already got it figured out, Ibiki said with a small smirk. Yugao and Kakashi had both asked him to join them for a somewhat late lunch. The minute they spoke to him without their masks on, he had suspicions of what was going on. Even in such a large village, words can travel quickly when the right people are spoken to. Do you know? Kakashi asked nonchalantly. He wouldn't have expected anything less than a man just as smart as Shikaku. Then tell us what you figured out. I overheard that you two made a bet with Naruto to chase him around the village. I also know that you were tasked by the Hokage to make sure that he stayed in his hospital room. He found out, and now he asked the two of you to take some time off so you were free for when he decides on your punishment for going against his orders. He told the two of them, getting Yugao to sigh and nod at the master interrogator. Yeah. We kind of asked you to join us for lunch so that we could stop thinking about what he'll do to us, but that's how it went, she explained. Hokage-sama asked us to talk to him after he was done talking to everyone else, and told us to cash in our off days so we'd be open whenever. She sighed once more. Kakashi nodded to this, but stayed quiet, as he felt that he didn't need to say anything else. Ibiki arched an eyebrow at the two of them. His eyebrow then lowered back to its original position, and the scarred man spoke again. Well, I can take a good guess as to what he might do. It might not help you though, and just make it worse on the two of you. Shoot. Kakashi replied simply. Yugao nodded to her partner's response. Ibiki leaned forward, and got into a thinking pose. While he was almost always an unmovable stone wall that lacked emotions, he was a little less so around his friends. You'll be taken off the force, most likely put in, as instead, and probably given some secret, and unspoken, but highly paid mission of guarding Naruto. That way, you'll have more leniency, as people, and you won't be subject to being taken off of watching Naruto, only to be replaced by someone who doesn't share our views on the boy. Yugao's eyes widened slightly, but noticeably. That's pretty feasible, she said honestly. That sounded like something Hiruzen would do, especially in regards to protecting and watching over Naruto, and, as much as she liked her mask, she could only do so much with the boy when she was on duty, which was all the time. Now, without the need for a mask, or ANBU clothing, she and Kakashi could help the boy out a lot more, without worry of breaking ANBU rules or anything. She could possibly teach him so he could be as good as his biological mother. Suddenly Ibiki picked his head up, suddenly alert for something, and looked off in a seemingly random direction. Neither Kakashi nor Yugao knew what was going on with him, as they hadn't seen this before, but they didn't want to ask questions until after. They could hear Ibiki whisper a single word under his breath before quickly getting up out of his seat and rushing out of the restaurant. That one word that he muttered under his breath was Anko. Inuzuka compound. At the Inuzuka compound, the clan matriarch was walking through the halls to get to her study. Like always, the rooms and hallways were as clean as humanly possible. It was rather odd how a clan so close to dogs had so many neat freaks, including her daughter Hana and herself. As she reached her destination, Sam opened the door to the study and closed it behind her. Normally, she would have kept it open for Kuramaru as well, but he was sleeping at the moment, taking some rest from their recent mission. The Inuzuka woman walked over to her desk quietly, opening one of the drawers and digging around in it. She swore that she had what she was looking for was inside her desk, but that didn't seem to be the case. As the search went on, Sam began to become more frantic in her search. Eventually, she found the item she was looking for behind a picture of Hana, which was taken the day that she got her Nikken. Sam looked at the scroll now in her hands, but she didn't look at the contents inside. She knew very well what was inside, as it was engraved in her head from hours upon hours of reading over it. The scroll was of a dark blue color, and rather plain except for the swirling pattern keeping the scroll closed. As she looked at it, two voices appeared in her head, repeating the words that she had heard several years ago. It would be a benefit for all of us, the male voice echoed throughout her head. There's no obligation, but we ask that you at least hold on to it, and look it over, even if you say no in the end. The female voice said, reminding her of two good friends that she had lost years before. She had been tempted to sign the scroll so many times throughout the years, but she didn't want to do it because it would keep the two that were involved in the scroll's deal from seeing anyone else but each other. She had tried other methods to care for him, but they were all shut down. Sarutobi didn't know about the scroll. If he did, then he probably would have been at least partially for signing it, if not totally against it, and demanding it be handed over. The scroll, though, was as legitimate as it could get, and not even the current Hokage would have the ability to deny the authenticity of the document. It couldn't be destroyed either, as the seals on it kept it from withering and suffering from the effects of nature, and Anko would have to see the scroll for herself and tell Tsum what she thought about it. There was a possibility that she would be on the same boat with Tsum, but there was also the possibility of her wanting for the matriarch to sign the scroll. You're in charge of the kid now, so it isn't just my decision anymore, she muttered to herself, looking up and at the door, as she heard another door opening. It was rather quiet in the compound at the moment, and with the enhanced senses that all Inuzuka had, she was sure to pick up the sound of light chatter, a door opening, and several feet walking about. Opening the door, she was able to hear her daughter call out to her. Tsum smiled, and began to walk back out into the main room, the scroll in her hands. Anko, and the others, a few minutes ago, Hana hadn't attempted to stop what she was doing. It was just too much fun, not to mention cute and adorable. It didn't seem that Kurenai or Anko minded though, as neither of them talked to her about stopping what she was doing. Hearing that wonderful sound every time she did it was music to her enhanced ears. It was true, Hana couldn't stop petting Naruto's whiskers. Hearing him purr, and watching him react to her wasn't something she could put into words, but she just loved the little, adorable boy in her arms. It was hard to hear that he was going through immunity training, as she knew it was difficult. People that had Inuzuka blood were born with an astounding immune system, so immunity training wasn't as bad for them, as it was for just about everyone else. As much as she loved petting him, she knew that she couldn't do it in public. People would wonder what she was doing, and would also become infatuated with petting the boy's whiskers. She had to make sure that it never left the compound. However, she was planning on telling her mother about it, just to see how she would react. She also had to make sure that it didn't leave the mouth of her little brother, the little blabbermouth, an idiot. The group walked on for a few more minutes before reaching the compound, and Kurenai held the door open so Hana could bring Naruto inside first. Hana nodded with a smile, as she walked through the door, and looked around for her mother. "Ka-san?" she called out, walking over to one of the couches, and sitting down, keeping the little boy in her arms, as she continued to pet him. Kurenai shut the door behind herself after Anko walked in, and the three waited for Tsum to enter the room. Anko and Kurenai were guests, and it wasn't right for them to wander around the compound unless given permission to do so. Clan compounds had a different set of rules than normal houses, and the two of them knew that. Tsum entered the main room with a scroll in her hands. She looked around the room, and spotted her daughter, Naruto, Anko, and Kurenai. Kurenai was watching Hana pet the unconscious Naruto, and Anko was looking around from where she was standing. Anko's head looked over in the direction of Tsum, as the Inuzuka woman came into view. She had a calm, yet stern look on her face, as she walked to the group. Anko knew that she wanted to know about Naruto, and his condition, so she wanted to get that out of the way. Unfortunately, she was stopped by the youngest woman in the room, who smiled, and called out to her mother again. "Ka-san, you have to try this." She stopped petting Naruto for a moment, and held the boy out to her mother. "He purrs when you pet him." Hana looked at her mother expectantly, who simply looked at her quizzically, and, as if Hana had grown a second head. She wasn't sure if this was a joke or not, and the Inuzuka matriarch slowly reached out to pet the boy's whiskers. Much to her surprise, Naruto actually did purr like Hana said he would, and she was instantly hooked on petting him. It was an unexplainable feeling, but she couldn't stop petting the boy. She eventually had to stop because Hana pulled him away, almost like she wanted to keep the boy, and pet him forever. Little did they know, a little boy with brown messy hair was watching the entire thing, and even giggled at the sight of the boy purring. In an instant, he was gone from the scene, completely unnoticed. After Tsum was done petting Naruto, the matriarch of the clan looked at Anko, and took a step away from the group. "Let's talk about my studies. You can come too, Kurenai," she spoke, as she walked away, getting the two women to follow her to the study, where all of the clan business was done, and taken care of. Once they were in the study, Tsum shut the door and looked at the two of them. So please explain to me why Naruto looked like the villagers had a piece of him, she said calmly, trying to keep the famous Inuzuka temper down for the moment. Anko gave out a nervous smile, and Kurenai did the same, as she was also at fault for Naruto making his way into the forest of death. I kinda rushed his training, Anko said sheepishly. Tsum raised an eyebrow. What kind of training? Anko sighed, and looked down at the ground. Immunity training. Tsum almost popped a blood vessel at what she had just heard. She knew what the boy held, and what his family line consisted of, but he was still too young and inexperienced to go through something as strenuous as immunity training. You what? She yelled at the younger woman. He's 6 years old, Anko. You could have done anything other than immunity training, and that is one of the worst ones aside from interrogation. She growled and sighed, placing a hand over her face. Honestly, Anko, what the hell? She ended somewhat quietly. Anko sighed and growled in slight anger. I know I fucked up, and it won't happen again. I don't need you people to keep telling me what I did wrong when I already know it myself. She began to pace around the study. I messed up. I get it. I rushed his training, yeah? Now shut up about it, and move on. I wanted to get it out of the way by giving him small and almost harmless amounts, just enough for his body to identify and become immune. She stopped and sighed once more. I'll stop and work on something else. Happy now. She knew that she messed up. She knew that it was a bad idea, and she didn't need for every person she came across to tell her what she already knew. Tsum nodded. Good. She then handed her the scroll that was in her hands. Take a look at this when you have the time. Since you're watching over him now, it isn't just my decision anymore. Anko took the scroll hesitantly, and noted the spiral that sealed the scroll. She didn't say anything, but nodded, as she put the scroll away for now. Kurenai only looked at the scroll for a short moment before Anko put it away, but she was still able to see the spiral that kept the scroll close. She said nothing, as well, but spoke up for a moment to avoid the awkward silence. So Anko has graciously agreed to let me be Naruto's instructor when he becomes a genin, and when I become a jonin. Tsum raised an eyebrow, and looked at the pair curiously. Oh? Do tell. She motioned for Kurenai and Anko to go on. Anko sighed once more. Yeah, after today, she has it set in stone that she won't be allowing me to be Naruto's instructor when he graduates. She then smiled slightly, nodding in agreement. Though, it's probably for the best. Tsum nodded, as well. I think so. Hey, I have a son about Naruto's age. They'll probably get along well too. Maybe they'll be teamed up later, she said with a grin. Yeah, Anko said in response. Well, we have to get going. Make sure that Naruto heals right. She laughed sheepishly, as she looked at Naruto, who was still under Hana's care. The Inuzuka girl didn't want to give Naruto up, it seemed, but she knew that the boy had to return home with his mother eventually. With a little trouble, Hana handed Naruto back to Kurenai. Don't worry, Kurenai said with a smile, taking Naruto away from Hana. When he wakes up and recovers, he can see his angel again. The red-eyed woman laughed, as she walked out of the house next to a laughing Anko, leaving Hana blushing, as Tsum raised an eyebrow at the name. Kurenai and Anko returned home with Naruto, only to see Ibiki at the door waiting for them. Anko simply sighed, and began to tell the tale of the day's events. Omake, non-stop nightmares, effects of Anko's poisons. Naruto was running through the streets of Konoha, as fast as his little legs could take him. It wasn't all that fast, as the poisons that were in his body were already affecting him on a physical level. His vision was already starting to get blurry, and his limbs were heavy. His thinking was also slowed, but he was still at least somewhat capable in his current form. Earlier in the day, Naruto had been told by his adoptive mother that he was going to go through immunity training, and what he had inside of him would be able to help him get through it faster than normal people. Of course, they both knew that she was referring to the fox, but neither felt like saying it out loud. Anko wanted to make it interesting though, and told Naruto to run while she chased him, and threw dipped in the various poisons. She ensured him that she had deadly accuracy, and wouldn't hit him anywhere dangerous. With each passing second, Naruto's body became less and less responsive to his brain, moving on its own, and his vision was changing and distorting all of the time, making it difficult to stay in a straight line. However, he was able to make out the presence of Kurenai, and made an effort to get behind her. Rapid healing helped his body become immune faster, but it didn't make the process any less painful. Hopefully Kurenai could help him stay away from Anko for a while. Naruto felt himself being moved, but with his current situation, he wasn't sure if it was his body moving on its own, or if someone was moving him. Suddenly he felt several sharp pains in his back, and when that happened, his vision returned, but the hallucinogens also kicked in at the same time. Naruto believed that he could hear something, almost like a faded and distant bark, and the little boy looked up at one of the rooftops to see 3 dogs running and jumping around, as if gravity didn't have a hold on them. To him, it was like they were flying puppies, he muttered, trying to keep his head up. When he was let go from Kurenai's grasp, the little boy decided to follow the pups, trying to keep up with them while on the ground. It was difficult, but he managed to keep his eyes on the pups, and followed them through the village, seeing many odd things as he walked around. Some people had off-colored hair, or extremely large eyes, and some looked outright cartoony. Some people lacked faces, but he could tell that all of them were looking at him with disdain and anger. He tried his best to focus on the dogs, but the looks that he felt he was getting were starting to eat away at him. He couldn't escape the feeling of the village's anger this time, so he just had to endure it. Eventually he reached the outskirts of the village, and many more odd things began to happen around him. Colors were changing, people were starting to become more distorted than before, and he felt immense pain, yet no pain at all, at the same time. He was in the area where the training grounds were, and the pups that he was following were now on the ground in front of him, leading him to a vacant training ground. Naruto had no idea where he was going, but he knew that he wanted to follow the pups and get to them. They seemed somewhat familiar, but he couldn't place why he felt he had seen them before, or where he had seen them. Naruto arrived at the training ground, which was surrounded by a tall fence that had multiple warning signs. Naruto, unable to read, having never really been properly taught, only knowing what he had been taught by those kind to him, or having learned on his own through great effort, and this was made harder in his current condition, couldn't read the signs, but he assumed that they were welcoming him into the training grounds. Naruto watched as the pups crawled through a small opening at the bottom of the fence, and the boy followed them without care. As soon as he walked through, the pups began to move faster, and it became harder for Naruto to keep up with them. The air around him was dangerous and dark, but also calming in an odd way. The forest that he was in was almost untouched by human hands. The animals here lived and hunted by themselves, growing and adapting to their dangerous homes appropriately. This was as natural as nature could get, with the exception of the main tree at the center, which also acted as a tower. Even away from all of the people, Naruto still felt the air of hatred surrounding him. Because there was hardly anything else for his young brain to focus on, it was eating away at him much quicker than in the village. It was starting to make him violently uncomfortable, and he just wished that his new mother, Anko, could come in and take away the pain. "You'd like that, huh?" a familiar voice said, venom dripping from every word. "For me to just come on in and save your ass like before? Learn to take care of yourself better, you little shit." Naruto was sure he knew the voice, but he had never heard Anko say anything in that sort of tone with him. He was sure, though, that her words were filled with the same hatred and malice that the rest of the village had. He didn't like this, and he wanted it to stop. "Stop?" the vision of Anko said with a laugh, appearing in front of Naruto with a look of hate. "It's too much fun to see the demon of Konoha cry like a baby, so why would we stop?" Kurenai, Ibiki, Nico, and Inu all appeared, giving the boy similar looks of hate. He couldn't see Nico and Inu's faces, but he was sure that they felt the same way that the vision of Anko did. "Do you really think we care about you? We're just making you comfortable so we can knock you back to the ground again, and see you in pain. You killed so many people, and since you're just one monster, we'll hurt you 10 times over for every person you killed." Ibiki stepped up, giving Naruto a glare of hate that could be replicated by no other. "I was going to kill you, and rip you apart when I saw you at Anko's house, but it would be much more painful for you to let you suffer by people you thought cared about you. You're an idiot, my dear godson. To even think that people would care about you. The Ikarakas only like you because you give them money, and the Hokage can't stand you." Kurenai spat out, looking at Naruto with a harsh expression. He was currently on the ground crying, surrounded by the hallucinations of the people he cared about. Hiruzen Sarutobi moved the others aside, getting a good look at Naruto. "To think that I would actually care for filth like you. The only reason I do anything for you is to look good in front of everyone else, to make it seem like I am kind enough to like someone like you. You killed hundreds of my people, and the Yondaime himself. Scum like you shouldn't exist." Everyone took turns saying harsh, hurtful, and hateful things to Naruto, the boy turning into a sobbing mess. He didn't know that it was all a hallucination, and believed that everyone he thought cared for him actually didn't care for him at all. He thought that everyone turned on him, that he was truly alone in the world. Nearby, a rather large panther with pitch black fur was able to hear the sobbing mess that was Naruto, and stalked over to the boy. It watched carefully, as Naruto lay on the ground crying, and sobbing uncontrollably, as he attempted to say something that the panther could not understand. Just as Naruto was beginning to pass out from the overload of emotional pain, the animal could feel the air of hurt and pain that Naruto was giving off, and stalked closer to him, keeping its eye on the human child. It had taken note of the extra presences in the area, and knew that it had to be quick, so that neither it nor the boy would be eaten or hurt. The panther lowered its head, and bit down on the collar of Naruto's jumpsuit, the boy being lighter than it expected the boy to be. The large cat picked its head back up, raising Naruto off of the ground by a good 2 feet. It then heard something whizzing through the air, and quickly dropped Naruto to run off. It had planned on going back for the boy once it was safe, but at the moment it had to hide. Naruto felt that he was falling, but he had given up on life, and didn't care if he hit the ground or not. However, he never hit the ground like he expected to. Still, he didn't seem to care, and lay lifelessly in the arms of whoever was holding them. They were probably taking him somewhere where they could beat him up, and he didn't see the point of resisting. Suddenly, he felt at ease, and all of his troubles went away. He couldn't understand what this feeling was, but he liked it, and enjoyed it. He even purred in the arms of the woman holding him, and he looked up at her only to see the face of the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. He smiled slightly, as he could see the woman's distinct red markings on her face. "Angel," he said quietly before drifting into unconsciousness. All of his troubles were eased at the moment, and he didn't care what else happened around him. Omake, gossip in Konoha. The whiskered boy that purrs. It had been a little more than a day since the young Kiba Inuzuka saw the blonde boy about his own age. He had never seen the boy before, but his features stood out to him. He had blonde hair that was certainly different than a Yamanaka's, 3 marks somewhat similar to his own that looked like whiskers, and he purred like a cat. The last one made Kiba laugh every time he thought about it, and he knew that he had to tell someone about it. Kiba was with his friends at the Akimichi barbecue restaurant with his friends, and an older Inuzuka clan member. The other member of his clan was there to watch over the kids, so they didn't get into trouble, and throughout the day they hadn't done much. It was a little past noon, and the group would have been at the restaurant earlier if they hadn't been so caught up in the games that they played. For now, they were hungry, and the older Inuzuka member offered to pay for the meals of the kids that didn't have any money on them. As they all sat at the table, Kiba thought back to the blonde boy, and laughed again. He thought it was incredibly silly how a boy could purr like that, and he knew that he had to tell his friends about it, so they could laugh too. "Hey guys," he said excitedly, and rather loudly, as well. "There was this kid at my house yesterday, and he purrs like a cat." He laughed, and so did all of the other boys in the group, but the girls simply looked at him in curiosity, wanting to hear more about this adorable-sounding boy. Kiba picked up on the looks that he was getting, and smiled more. Yeah, he had bright blonde hair, and whiskers on his face. My sister was holding him, and petting his face, making him purr. He couldn't stop laughing. It was the most ridiculous thing to him, but the people around him didn't think quite like he did. A few tables away, one Ino Yamanaka sat with her friends, discussing all of the things that they had heard from other people. Ino's eyes widened upon hearing about a purring boy from the other table, and stayed quiet in order to listen in. Apparently, he was with a woman in a tan jacket, and another woman with long hair and red eyes, possibly people he lived with or was friends with. Ino then talked about this purring boy with her friends, and it seemed that some of them had actually seen the boy on the streets. He had bright blue eyes, and a smile that never went away. They all agreed to spread this around, so that they could find this mysterious purring boy easier. At another table a little ways away, Shikamaru Nara and Choji Akamichi were talking to, and eating across from one another. Beside them were their mothers, Yoshino and Yumi respectively. The 2 older women were talking to each other about simple things, like what they would be cooking for dinner, how the family is, and how to keep your lazy-ass husband in line when he needs to be. Both the boys and the mothers were able to overhear Kiba, and eventually Ino, talk about this fabled whiskered boy, and while Yumi and Yoshino knew who they were talking about, they were relatively quiet about the subject, instead talking about his 2 mentioned companions, the one with the coat, and the one with the eyes. Shikamaru sighed, looking at his friend across the table. Choji looked back, and stopped eating for just a moment. "Should we find this guy, and help him?" Choji asked. Shikamaru sighed once more, and nodded lazily. "Sure, whatever." Later, at the Inuzuka compound, Kiba walked back to the clan compound next to the other member of his clan, still thinking about the odd boy he had only seen for a moment. As he walked into the compound, the first person he could see was his older sister, who had a leather belt in her hands, snapping it against her hand, as she looked at him with a mad smirk. "Word travels fast, little brother, and I'm sure the whole village is going to hear about my new coat once I tan your hide." She dashed after him, giving him a little time to react so that it could be a fun chase for her. This went on for quite a while, Hana chasing Kiba around the compound with the belt, lashing out at him with it whenever she got close enough. She could have easily caught him, but she stayed at her current pace to scare her brother, and to make sure that he didn't spread rumors around ever again. The twisted smirk on her face made sure of it. Several girls and young women prowled the streets. There were about 5 or 6 in each group, and they all combed the streets on the hunt for a boy who was rumored to live in Konoha. They had all heard it from one person or another, but didn't know that the source of the rumor was a little Inuzuka boy who was the same age of the boy they were after. They wanted to see this adorable little person, and pet his whiskers to make him purr. Most of the groups had both shinobi and civilian girls, but the all-shinobi groups took to the rooftops while the mixed and civilian groups stayed on the ground. One girl was on the hunt for Naruto, as well, but she had different intentions from the others. She had to find Naruto to warn him about the people trying to find him, as she knew that they would never let him go if they got a hold of him. Hana Inuzuka had to protect the blonde boy that purrs. Naruto was sleeping soundly in the arms of Anko. The snake mistress was sitting on her couch, quietly talking with Kurenai, who sat on the other side of the couch. Ibiki had left a few minutes ago. Anko and Kurenai both told the interrogator about what events took place throughout the day. He was satisfied with what he had heard, and was glad that Anko learned her lesson about rushing into things. They had both found out early on that they weren't to leave Naruto alone. When Anko set him down on the bed, the little boy began to shake and stir. It was obvious by the changing expressions on his face that whatever dream he had would quickly turn into a nightmare. Once she picked him back up, he became peaceful again, and the look of pain on his face was replaced with a small smile. Kurenai held him, as well, getting the same reaction. Whatever was going on in his head seemed to be dependent on if he was being held or not. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and the 2 conscious people in the room turned their heads towards the door. Kurenai stood up, and looked at Anko. "I'll go get it," she said, as she walked to the door. The mistress opened the door to see a slightly out-of-breath Hana, and her pups on the other side. Hana painted, and looked up to see Kurenai. It wasn't the woman that she was expecting or hoping for, but she was good enough. Not only was she tired from running around to find Anko and Naruto, but she was also chasing Kiba to get back at him for spreading the rumor. It had only been a few hours, and it was almost reaching the end of the day, and the rumor had already spread all throughout the village. "Hana?" Kurenai asked, a look of confusion on her face. "What are you doing here? Why are you out of breath?" Hana stood straight up, and looked at Kurenai. She was still panting, but not enough so that she couldn't be heard. "I need to find Naruto. Warn him." Kurenai looked at her with curiosity. She didn't know what Hana needed to warn him about, as she hadn't heard anything relating to Naruto throughout the day, but it seemed important, and Kurenai moved to let her inside. "He's still asleep, but Anko's awake." Hana stepped inside, and looked around. It was a nice little home. It wasn't as clean as her home, but it was still nice and tidy. She then looked at Anko, who was holding the sleeping Naruto in her arms. The little boy was holding on to her, and a small smile was visible on his face. It was a lovely sight, causing Hana to smile warmly. Anko looked at Hana curiously. She was able to hear what Hana said outside, and motioned for the genin to come over to her. "What's going on?" she asked casually. Hana glanced at Naruto briefly, before her gaze returned to Anko. "There are girls everywhere, all looking for Naruto. Civilians, shinobi, everyone. We have to keep them away from Naruto, since I think they'll never let him go if they get their hands on him." Anko raised a curious eyebrow. She wanted to know why all of these people were after her little Naruto, more importantly why they were all women. Her look was caught by Hana, who nodded. "My brother saw us at the compound, and must have seen Ka-san pet Naruto's whiskers. He spread the rumor about Naruto." She told them, remembering that her brother had told her everything that he had told his friends, and the people around him. "He also mentioned you, and Kurenai." Anko looked at Hana with a deadpan expression. "They're after him to pet him?" she asked with a bland tone of voice. Hana nodded, making Anko sigh. "Great. They know about us, and if they don't they'll ask around to find us." Anko stood up slowly, and put Naruto in Hana's arms, much to Inuzuka's surprise. "What are you doing?" Hana asked, glancing down at Naruto. Anko moved around the house, shuffling things around, and pulling out scrolls from hiding spots. The scrolls were completely blank, and had no distinct markings on them. "Making Naruto disappear," she said simply, putting the scrolls in the pocket of her trench coat. Her hands joined together to make several hand signs. An exact replica of Anko poofed into existence beside the original, looking at her creator. The clone said nothing, as she made a single hand sign, transforming into Naruto before quickly leaving the house. Hana looked at Anko with curiosity and confusion. What was that? Clones shouldn't be able to change. Anko pulled the scrolls out once again, and motioned for Hana to follow her through the house. Kaga Bunshin. Forbidden, and taxing version of the standard Bunshin that pours a fair deal of chakra to make the clones solid. There's also a nifty feature that comes along with it, but I'll touch on it later. she told Hana, as she went to the bedroom that she and Naruto shared. She still hadn't gotten around to getting another bed, even though she continued to tell herself that she would do it tomorrow. Anko unrolled one of the scrolls and laid it on the ground. She then stood back up and went to her closet, where their clothes were. She took everything that Naruto owned and sealed them into the scrolls. Any evidence of Naruto being in her house was sealed into the scrolls. Hana simply watched in silence as she held Naruto, softly petting his whiskers. The boy purred softly and nuzzled into Hana's hold. "You don't mind holding these, do you?" Anko asked Hana, holding the scrolls to the girl that was petting her son. Hana shook her head and looked down at herself. "Put them in my pockets," she said to Anko, who did as she was told, and put them in the pockets of the cloak she wore. It was similar to the white cloak that Mednin wore, but was tailored more for battle and mobility. It had more pockets and places for storing things, and was made with the same materials that the Chunin and Jonin flak jackets were composed of. Anko made 3 more clones after putting the scrolls away, which all transformed into Naruto, and left the house to distract the groups of girls that were looking for him. "If I might ask," Hana said, looking at Anko while still petting Naruto, "why seal everything away and give them to me?" Anko smirked and glanced down at Naruto. "I've seen the way you and your mother act around him. I'm sure that there are some Inuzuka girls after him." Her statement made Hana blush. With their dogs and noses, it's only a matter of time before they track his scent and get here. If they come here and don't see a single thing suggesting that Naruto lives here, they'll assume that he's just been here a lot and not living with me. They'll probably find his old home and spend more time there before giving up for the day. We could maybe stay at your compound and Kurenai's place until this whole thing dies down. Hana's eyes widened considerably. She hadn't thought about Inuzuka women going after Naruto as well, and she really should have thought of that first. There was also the problem of the Aburame girls as well, wanting to investigate the rumors of a boy who purred like a cat. While not insect-related, it was probably interesting enough to catch their bespectacled eyes. The Aburame women honestly scared her a little, but she had to worry about her own clan for the time being. She began to quickly move out to the living room, but slow enough for Anko to catch wind and follow her. "What are you doing?" Anko asked, clearly confused. "We're heading to the compound. If Inuzuka women are after him, like I bet they are, then we have to make sure that none of them mark him," Hana said, walking to the door at a pace just slow enough for Kurenai to open the door and get out of the way. Kurenai and Anko followed Hana to the Inuzuka compound, both curious of what she was saying and what she was planning. In little time they arrived at the compound and came through the door. When they got through the door, the Himura triplets ran into the compound and lay down. They had been rather quiet at Anko's house, which only meant that they had done something worth being punished for. Sim was in the living room at the time, reading over something while sitting next to her, Kuramaru. She looked at the group that just entered the compound curiously. She took note of Naruto in Hana's arms, and the look of urgency on her daughter's face. Hana looked at her mother, and calmed down slightly. It wasn't good to just barge into the main building with a look that screamed she was going to do something important. Hana took a few steps forward, and placed Naruto down in the center of the room. Naruto had calmed considerably in Hana's arms thanks to her petting him, but he was now shaking just the slightest bit. The Inuzuka girl bit her thumb, and whistled, causing her to surround Naruto's head, and do the same with their paws. Hana's thumb, and the triplets' paws bled small amounts of blood. Slowly, Hana brought her thumb down to Naruto's forehead, where her hand was caught by her mother's, keeping her from making contact with Naruto. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Sim asked seriously. She knew exactly what Hana was doing, but she needed Hana to explain herself. She shook her head at her daughter. "I'm not letting you do this," she said sternly. "You're not marking him to keep him away from others. Didn't you hear me?" Hana asked incredulously. "I'm beating them at their own game by doing this." Meanwhile, Anko and Kurenai simply watched the arguing mother and daughter, some of the Inuzuka clan members walking into the main room to see what all the commotion was about. "Can I ask what's going on?" Kurenai asked, getting Hana and Sim's attention. Sim looked at the mistress and took a deep breath. Several of the clan members were gathering around, as well. Some of them seemed to be the ones looking for Naruto by the way they were looking at the boy. "Hana wants to mark Naruto so nobody else can have him. If she did, it would be like marriage in the eyes of an Inuzuka. We mark him, he is essentially claimed by whoever marks him, and no other Inuzuka woman can have him, or man if they swing that way. The thing is, while Naruto can still marry someone else, Hana is bound to him by marking him. She can't have anyone else other than him." She released her daughter's hand, and stood up, facing the Inuzuka members. Hana didn't make the mark on Naruto's forehead, and instead whistled to the triplets to stop, as well. They whimpered but obeyed Hana. Alright, listen up everybody, some said to the clan. I will not have anyone in this clan chase after this little 6-year-old like he's prey. Naruto, Anko, and Kurenai are all now official allies of the clan, and you will treat them like you would any other ally. If I even hear about one of you fawning over him like a stupid fangirl or a stalker, then that person will have kennel duty for a month with no use of the shovel. You got that? She asked her clan, getting everyone to nod their heads. Sun looked down at her daughter, and pulled her up. She smiled at the younger Inuzuka. Pretty mature of you to sacrifice yourself to keep others away from him. You'll be a good clan leader when you get older. She nodded with a smile. While the girls of the Inuzuka clan sighed in defeat, they knew that it was best to do what Sun said, and not go after him. Not long after, Naruto, Anko, and Kurenai left the clan compound to go to Kurenai's house. The sun was beginning to set, and the two women were conversing softly in the living room. Naruto was sleeping soundly in Kurenai's room, laying on her bed, and recovering from the last of the poisons. His system had cleared out just about everything, but there was still a little bit of the poisons left in his body. He had calmed down considerably, and no longer needed to be held to keep calm. He woke up with a slow start. His body hurt, and burned all over, but it was a ghostly pain. He could still move just as well as he could before, and the pain wasn't enough to keep him from moving. He groaned as his eyes opened. The ghostly pain he was feeling burned every part of his body, making the boy not want to move. Instead, he moved his eyes and looked around at the room he was in. It wasn't a place he was familiar with, and the bed had a different feel from the one she shared with Anko. Naruto also felt indefinitely uncomfortable. He had no words that could, or would, explain why he felt so out of place, and was even unable to do it within the confines of his mind. Slowly, Naruto got off of the bed, and continued to look around. He was worried, and scared, but could not place why he had these feelings. He was in a somewhat panicked state, and began to move around the room, before making his way to the door. The door was open, and Naruto walked through. He walked through the hallway only to find Kurenai and Anko speaking. They didn't seem to notice him, and neither of them turned to look at the boy. Upon seeing Anko, though, something happened in Naruto's mind that made him run at Anko and tackle her into a fierce hug. He didn't say anything, as he nuzzled into his mother, who was surprised to see him up, and hugged her, as tight as he was. Anko didn't say anything, and in an instant her motherly instincts kicked in. She wrapped her arms around Naruto, and held her close to her body. She didn't say anything either, and allowed a comfortable silence to consume the room. Kurenai watched with a warm smile, not saying anything to disturb the peace. Anko was experiencing a feeling, as well. This was truly the first time where Anko's motherly instincts kicked in. Her child was feeling awful about something, and she was there to make him feel better. It warmed her heart to see Naruto come right up to her, and hug her with everything he had. He was obviously uncomfortable about something, but it didn't matter what that something was to Anko. Several minutes passed, and Naruto's grip on his mother began to loosen. He felt better with her right there, and all of his worries were washed away by her comforting embrace. Naruto looked up at Anko, and cracked a small smile. Anko smiled back, and the two were still quiet until Naruto looked around, and noticed Kurenai. "Where are we?" he asked her, in a cute, but curious, sounding way. "This is Kurenai's house. You've become pretty popular within the last few hours, and people are all over the streets trying to find you so they could try to pet you," she replied with a grin, and a small laugh. Naruto laughed, as well, but it was filled with uncertainty and curiosity. He didn't understand why they wanted to pet him, and he wasn't awake or coherent enough to know that he purred when his whiskers were petted. Kurenai smiled at her godson, and stood up, glancing at the door. Naruto had a rough and stressful day, even if he wasn't awake for most of it. The mistress walked over to the door, and turned around to face the two others in her house. She looked at Naruto with the calm and motherly smile she always seemed to have. "Let's head out to wherever Naruto wants to go, and eat my treat." A half-hour later, Ichiraku Ramen. At the Ichiraku Ramen shack, two young women and one blonde-haired boy were sitting at the counter. Naruto sat on Anko's lap, looking adorable, as he did so, and Kurenai to the left of Anko. The two women watched in horror and minor disgust, not to mention shock, as Naruto practically inhaled the noodles in each bowl of ramen. He was currently on his 27th bowl, and he showed no signs of stopping. Anko was astonished that one little boy could eat so much ramen, but he had also spent the entire day sleeping and fighting off the poisons that were in his body. He was drained of energy, and he needed to eat to get it all back. Kurenai, however, felt all of the money she had been saving up being drained from her pockets. She'd had only a single bowl, and Anko also had one, but Naruto ate more than his weight in ramen. While the three sat at the counter, 2 people watched intently on the other side, keeping their eyes on Anko at almost all times. Tuchi and Ichiraka even had other workers take over operations in the back so they could spend their time silently evaluating Anko. Aside from Hiruzen, they were the closest people to Naruto. Before Anko came along, they had to make sure she was worthy of being the mother of Naruto. Anko could feel both sets of eyes staring at her, and if she was being honest with herself, she was extremely unnerved. The father-daughter duo had a glare so cold that it would make even Ibiki flinch. She knew that the Uchiha family was close to Naruto, but she never would have assumed that they'd be judging her to see if she could watch over him and mother him, judging her worthiness of being Naruto's mother. She would have to make an effort to get them more involved in Naruto's life since, if they were judging her, it must mean they considered him family, and that was not something she was going to cut out of Naruto's life. After all, they were a part of his life, and so deserved to spend time with him just as much as her. Well into the meal, Naruto began to slow down, making Tuchi and Iam glance at the boy. Normally he ate anywhere from 30 to 40 bowls at a time, but 74 was a bit much for him. Kurenai hummed in thought. I guess it makes sense. His body wasted too much energy today purging the poisons from his bottom mph. Kurenai was interrupted by Anko, who had her hand over Kurenai's mouth to keep her from speaking. The Ichirakas glared at Anko even more. The glare was returned with a sheepish and nervous smile courtesy of Anko. By the end of the night, the glares given out by Tuchi and Iam were almost gone, and replaced with a look of satisfaction. This Anko woman seemed alright, if Kurenai was around her to keep her from doing stupid things all the time. That night, Naruto and Anko stayed at Kurenai's house, as a safety measure. Even with the Inuzuka girls off of their trail, they still worried about the Aburame women that would be interested in his abnormal qualities. Because of Kurenai's persistence, the two of them took her bed while Kurenai took the couch. Anko tried to argue, but the godmother wasn't going to let Naruto sleep on the couch, even though Anko would be open to the idea. The next day, Naruto and Anko had a small breakfast with Kurenai before heading back to their home. When they got there, Anko spotted a few signs of people going through their house, and told Naruto to take notes. The signs were subtle, but Anko knew that several people went through their house throughout the previous day. Anko had forgotten that she had left all of Naruto's belongings with Hana, so the two of them left to go to the Inuzuka compound to retrieve the scrolls. Hana happily went to go get the scrolls, and in the time that she was gone, Naruto played with the Himura triplets. He loved the little pups, and it seemed that they enjoyed his presence, as well. Sum was out of the house at the moment. Apparently, she was called to the Hokage because of an emergency meeting. She had been out all morning, and it was up to Hana to watch over Kiba until she came back. Hana walked into the main room where Naruto, the pups, and Anko were. She smiled at the little boy playing with her pups before looking up at Anko. She handed the scrolls to her and nodded. I guess it was a good thing that I held on to them overnight. Scrolls don't have sense of the things that are inside them, other than dried ink, I guess. Hana looked at Naruto again, and smiled at the boy who was playing with the little dogs. It looks like he's recovered from the poisons, she said happily, getting Anko to nod in agreement. Yeah, he woke up last night. Kurenai took us out to eat, and practically drained her pockets with all the food he ate, Anko said with a laugh, remembering how she had to split the check with Kurenai to keep the red-eyed woman from going bankrupt. How much did he eat? Hana asked, genuinely curious now. 83 bowls, Anko responded with a grin, making Hana look at her with wide eyes. Anko simply nodded. Yeah, apparently he eats about 30 to 40 normally, but since he was hungry from wiping the poison out, he ate a lot more than usual. Hana couldn't believe it. How can a single person eat that much? How can a 6-year-old eat that much? She asked incredulously, sneaking a look at Naruto to make sure he was alright. High metabolism. Not really sure what else to say other than that, Anko replied, turning to look at Naruto. Come on Naruto, let's head home. We can come back later. Naruto whined, and the pups seemed to understand the situation, as they were whimpering. Hana smiled, and picked up the pups, piling them into her arms. You can see them later Naruto, Hana told the little boy. Reluctantly, Naruto agreed, and followed Anko out the door. Outside, the two of them walked out of the compound side by side. As they reached the gates, they were able to see Sum walking back. Clearly she was thinking about something, but not enough so that she would run into anyone. As they passed Sum, the Inuzuka matriarch shot a glance at Anko, who caught it, and returned it. Something important happened during that meeting, and Anko would have to come back to the compound to talk about it. A few weeks later, Naruto and Anko were relaxing at their house. For the past few weeks, Anko had been training Naruto in becoming a smart and capable ninja. He had done exercises to make him think faster and remember things better. One of them was that Anko would change into a person, any person, and Naruto would only be able to look at whoever she was transformed into before she took off and hid somewhere in the village. He had to comb the village, and breakneck speeds, and looked at every person on every street to see if it was Anko. He also had to use this to hide in the open, so as to avoid the fangirls and stalkers still looking for him. The first few times he had done it, there were no added challenges or things to make it more difficult for him, but Anko started to make all similar exercises timed, so he would only have a certain amount of time to find this random person who was hiding somewhere in the village, or something along similar lines like going from point A to point B in X number of seconds or minutes. It was currently the early afternoon, and Naruto was resting on the couch and watching the television while Anko cooked lunch for them both. A knocking sound came from the door, and Naruto looked over at it. The knocking continued, and Anko spoke up to him from the kitchen. "Naruto, can you go get the door?" Anko asked. Naruto nodded, and sat up slowly, groaning in pain because of his sore body. "I've got it," he told her back. The little boy moved to the door, and opened it. Like when he looked at most people, he had to look up to see their face. The woman before him had black hair that went down to her back, dark, almost black eyes, and a pale complexion. She wore a tan apron, and a pale purple long-sleeve shirt. Beside her was a little boy about his own age that also had black hair and eyes, and wore a black shirt with a high collar and gray shorts. The older woman smiled down at Naruto, examining the boy. "Hello, Naruto," she said warmly. "My name is Makoto Uchiha. Can my son and I come in?" she asked. Naruto wasn't sure what to say, so he thought it over for a moment. "I'll be right back," he said to the two, leaving to go to the kitchen. The little boy beside Makoto looked up at his mother. "That's Naruto?" he asked her curiously. Makoto nodded back to him, and the two waited. "Kaa-san, there's a lady who says she's an Uchiha, and she wants to know my name." He said it loud enough for Makoto and Sasuke to hear outside. Naruto walked into the kitchen, looking at Anko who was cooking the food for them. Anko stopped cooking, and made a few discreet hand signs before walking over to the door to see Makoto and Sasuke. "You must be Anko," Makoto said. Sasuke looked at Anko with curiosity, and took note of her provocative clothing, but didn't look long enough to be dubbed a pervert or anything of the sort. "Yeah, I am," Anko replied cautiously. She didn't seem to mean harm, and wasn't anywhere near as cold nor as arrogant as the Uchiha normally were. "And if you don't mind, who are you?" Makoto shook her head. "Not at all. As I told Naruto, I'm Makoto Uchiha, Fugaka's wife," she told Anko, getting her to nod slightly. Makoto put her hand on Sasuke's shoulder, and looked down at her son. "This is Sasuke, my youngest son. Well, you obviously already know who I am, and who Naruto is. Would you like to come in, I guess?" She wasn't the best with the whole formal thing, so she was just doing what she thought was respectable. Anko moved to the side of the door, and motioned for the two of them to come in. Sasuke and Makoto bowed in respect, and walked inside. Sasuke didn't really have friends, and didn't know that many people outside of the clan were his own age. He hadn't been in a common house before, and it was surely interesting to him. It wasn't nearly as big as the compound, but everything that he had, they had just in a much smaller space. Sasuke looked at Naruto, and took in his distinct features. "I'm Sasuke," he said simply. Naruto smiled at Sasuke, and waved at him. "I'm Naruto. So you're a part of the Uchiha clan?" he asked. Sasuke returned Naruto's smile with one of his own, and nodded. "Yeah. Toussan is the clan head, and one day my brother Itachi is going to be the clan head." Naruto went wide-eyed. He believed that it was cool to be related to someone who was the leader of something, and the only thing cooler than a clan leader was the Hokage. "That's cool. Do you want to watch TV?" he asked. Sasuke nodded, and the two of them sat on the couch, and watched the television. Meanwhile, Makoto and Anko watched the two briefly before continuing their conversation. "Could we talk somewhere private?" Makoto asked, glancing at her son and Naruto, talking and watching the television. Anko looked at her with curiosity and confusion. "Sure," she replied, walking to the kitchen so she could talk and continue cooking. "What did you want to talk about?" Makoto followed Anko into the kitchen, and glanced back out to the living room before looking back at the snake mistress. "I'm so glad that you've taken Naruto in. I would have done the same thing if Fugaka had allowed it." She started off, getting Anko's attention. "I knew Kushina, you know. Did you now?" Anko asked, now even more interested in what Makoto had to say. Makoto nodded. "I did. We were good friends, and nothing hurt more than when her burden escaped, and killed her, and several more in the village. When it was stated that she was dead, I wanted to help Naruto in any way that I could, but I was tied up from doing so for one reason or another. For that I'm sorry." She bowed to Anko, who wasn't really sure how to respond. I see, Anko said. She wasn't really sure what else to say. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about? Mikoto nodded. Yes, actually, she said to the younger woman. Fugaku was at a meeting earlier this week, and the main topic was about your son, Naruto. This caught Anko's attention once more, and her cooking slowed down considerably. About a month ago, a similar meeting was called to order, and only the members of the shinobi clans attended. Hokage-sama told the people of the Shinobi Council about Naruto's heritage, and that he was going to reveal that information sometime in the future to the public. Anko nodded. Yeah. Some told me about the meeting the day it took place. Mikoto then continued, taking note of what Anko said. Good, then I believe that you should know that Hokage-sama took a vote with the people of the council, asking them if you and Naruto should be given the Uzumaki property ahead of time. Why would he ask the council before asking me? This is about me, and my son after all. She wanted to know why she wasn't told first, and she wanted to know why, as soon as possible. Mikoto nodded. He wanted to surprise you, but with everything Naruto has gone through, I believe that the two of you should know, as soon as it's brought up. Anko smiled at Mikoto. Well, thanks for telling me. I'm still thinking of a way to tell Naruto about his parents, so maybe I could do it at their old house. Mikoto believed that it was a good idea, and nodded with a smile on her face, as she stepped out of the kitchen, being followed by Anko. I think that's a good idea. I believe I've kept you long enough, so we'll be going now. Naruto and Sasuke were still talking and watching television. Mikoto was sure that the two of them were going to be great friends in the future. Sasuke, we've got to go. You can come back another day, or maybe he can come to the compound? She looked at Anko, who nodded in agreement. Okay, Ka-san, Sasuke said calmly. He liked his new friend Naruto, but he wasn't going to argue about it, as he knew that his mother could be scary if not obeyed. He turned back to Naruto, and smiled at him. I'll see you later, he said, as he hopped off the couch, and walked out of the house with his mother. Several days later, Naruto was spending another day relaxing in the house he shared with Anko. The two of them finally decided to take everything from his old house, and move some things into the house he lived in now. Before he lived with Anko, he lived in the Red Light District, a less reputable area of Konoha that housed even less reputable people. In all actuality, the people there in the district treated Naruto rather fairly. They saw no reason to harm or cause misfortune to a child, and were even the people who had given Naruto his first houseplant. Prostitutes, black market dealers, addicts, all of the shadier people of society, weren't as bad as people thought. Naruto was twirling a kunai in between his fingers, as he looked up at the ceiling. A little more than a week ago, Anko decided to get him started on weapons training. He hadn't done much with weapons before, as he still had to learn about fighting, and the various styles he could use. Not to mention, as well, she had tried to teach him her personal fighting style, a variant on the snake style that Orochimaru had taught her, but Naruto's body wasn't as thin or as flexible as hers, so that style was difficult for him. He could get a few of the forms down, but he wouldn't be able to master it as quickly as she did. Ka-san? Naruto spoke up looking at Anko, who was sitting on the other side of the couch. I'm bored. Anko looked at her son, and shrugged at him. Well, what do you want to do? She just wanted to lounge around all day, but if Naruto was going to do something, then she might as well be a part of it. Naruto was silent for a moment before catching the kunai. I know. I want to learn that card game that they played near my old house. The people had 2 cards, and put money on the table, and a guy with a green hat kept doing this little thing just before this one guy with a red headband got the money. Anko arched an eyebrow. You want to learn poker? She asked him, getting the boy to nod. Anko shrugged, and stood up. All right. I think I have some cards around here somewhere. Anko soon found a deck of cards, and produced 2 clones. You'll be playing against my clones, okay? She sat down on the floor, and patted a spot in front of her for Naruto to sit down. Once they were all situated, Anko began to shuffle the cards before dealing 2 out to the 3 players around her. Alright, so everyone gets 2 cards, and at the start, 2 cards are put down on the table. Take a look at the cards you have, but don't let anyone see your cards. She went on, and explained how poker worked, and Naruto seemed to have gotten the hang of it relatively well. She had even played a small game with him, which he won. Anko was a little surprised, but it seemed like he could actually be good at the game. Suddenly Ibiki appeared at the door, and knocked before letting himself in. Anko didn't have a problem with it, as she did the same things at Ibiki's, and Kurenai's house all the time. Anko, what are you doing? He asked in a gruff tone of voice, as he looked around the room, taking in the obvious gambling game. I'm just teaching the kid poker. He asked to be taught, and who am I to let him walk into a poker game sometime from now, and lose all of his money because he doesn't know how to play? Anko asked with a smile. This made Ibiki silent for a moment, and the two's eyes connected for what seemed like an eternity. Ibiki sighed, and stood next to Anko. If you're going to teach him, you might as well do it right. This earned him a glare from Anko. An hour passed, and Naruto was proving to be quite the skilled poker player. His face constantly showed several emotions, switching between them every half-second. It was impossible to tell if he was bluffing or not, and he always raised the betting amount when he had the chance. What made Ibiki and Anko interested was that the boy seemed to win every game of poker somehow, even when Anko was dealing the cards in favor of the other players. They couldn't explain it, but it was obvious that he had an inexplicable amount of luck. Someone else knocked on the door, and all attention was moved to whoever might be on the other side. Anko told the person that the door was open, and soon after, Kurenai entered the house. The woman was quite surprised to see Ibiki, 3 Ankos, and Naruto all on the ground playing poker. "You're teaching him how to gamble?" she asked incredulously. Anko shrugged casually, and took a glance at Naruto. "In a few years he is going to be gambling with his life on missions, so I might as well teach him how to gamble with money." Kurenai sighed, but turned to Ibiki, who looked at her, and said, "Watch the kid. He's won every game so far." With another sigh, Kurenai sat down and watched. They played another small game, and Naruto won once more. Kurenai knew a little about playing poker, but she didn't know all of the ins and outs. She did, however, understand that Naruto was making stupid decisions, and still coming out on top, even without realizing it. Groaning in frustration, Ibiki stood up, and put his hand on Naruto's shoulder. "That's it. We're taking him into an actual game with different players, and a different dealer." Anko didn't disagree, and the group left the house to go get some other friends of Anko's, 2 of them being Kakashi and Yugao, who were both pulled off of ANBU, and moved to Jonin rank. They were given some time to relax before they were to be, but on a long-term mission. Naruto won that game, as well, making it known to Ibiki, Kurenai, and Anko, that he was impossibly good at poker, and not to be played against. Naruto was loved by Lady Luck. The next day, Ibiki and Kurenai came back to Anko's house to find other ways to test his luck. A few hours had passed since then, and Ibiko groaned as he paced around. He stopped once he got an idea, and walked over to Anko and Kurenai. "All right. It's time to up the ante," he told them, getting their attention. "What do you have in mind?" Anko asked. "We've already done everything we can think of," Kurenai added. It was well into the day by now, and they were out of ideas. "I say that we convince the Hokage to let Anko play in the weekly Shinobi Council poker game." While not revealed to the public, Hokage-sama seems to have made it official in the eyes of the Shinobi Council members, so she should be able to get into the game. Ibiki explained, getting Anko to nod with a smile. Kurenai was still curious about one thing. But if Anko is going, how will this test Naruto's luck? Anko laughed, and shook her head. "I guess it would be pretty unfortunate if I were to get sick just before the game, forcing Naruto, the clan heir, to take my place at the game." This caused Kurenai to grin like a Cheshire cat. And so it happened. Anko, Ibiki, and Kurenai were able to convince the Hokage to let the Uzumaki/Namikaze clan into the weekly poker game, and Ibiki and Anko continued to play with Naruto to make sure that he was at the top of his game by the end of the week. The day of the game, Anko slowly came to the Hokage's office. Once she was let in, she walked to the center of the room, bent over slightly, and covered in a rather large blanket. She looked much more pale than usual, and it was obvious that she was sick. "Anko? Are you alright?" Hiruzen asked, watching Anko struggle to stay up. "No, not really. I don't know what happened, but, as you can see, I'm sick," Anko told Hiruzen in a stuffy voice, wobbling from side to side. "I can't make it to the poker game tonight." Hiruzen nodded in understanding. "I see. Well, I hope that you get better soon, Anko. Hopefully you can make it to the next one." Anko nodded back, but was silent for a moment. "Hokage-sama, can I ask you something?" Hiruzen thought it over before nodding. "What is it, Anko? Can Naruto take my place in the poker game?" she pleaded with the fire shadow. Hiruzen looked at her confused. "Naruto? I think he's a little young to be playing a game like poker, and he'll be around people much older than himself. Please, Hokage-sama," she begged. "I want for the Uzumaki clan to be represented in this game, and since it is his family, he deserves to be in the game." Hiruzen stayed quiet while thinking. He wasn't sure what to tell the woman before him, and slowly nodded. "He can come to the game. I'll make sure that everyone is aware beforehand." With a smile, as she was hiding a grin, Anko thanked the Hokage. "Thank you. I'll be sure to tell him." In the back of Hiruzen's mind, a little voice was telling him that allowing Naruto to play in the poker game was the worst decision he had ever made. But he wasn't the Hokage for nothing, and assured himself that nothing wrong could happen by letting a little boy play a game of cards. He was just a boy. Later that night, all of the shinobi clan heads gathered together at the Sarutobi household. The location of the weekly poker game was on a rotation, with this week being the home of Hiruzen. The order of the rotation has been the same way ever since Hiruzen was young, with it being Sarutobi, Uchiha, Yamanaka, Nara, Akimichi, Inuzuka, and Aburame. When Kushina came to Konoha, and her clan was recognized on the council, her clan was put in between Sarutobi and Uchiha, but was removed from the rotation upon her death. Anko walked with Naruto to the Sarutobi compound. Of course her sickly appearance had gotten worse over the day, to fool everyone in Konoha other than Kurenai and Ibiki. Naruto truly believed that she was sick with something, and tried to argue when she came along with him. Inside she was grinning like the cat that ate the canary at how she was able to fool her son with her act, as well. The two of them arrived at the Sarutobi compound, only to see a woman in her early or mid-20s holding a child in her arms standing outside at the front door. The woman smiled at Naruto and Anko, waving at them with her free hand. "Hello? You must be Naruto and Anko. Tu-san is inside with the other clan heads." The two waved back, Naruto smiling, and looking at the baby in her arms with interest. "Hello?" Anko said with a groggy voice. She then lightly pushed Naruto to go forward. "Come on, let's go inside. I'll lead you to where they are," the woman offered with a smile, getting Anko to nod. Naruto nodded, as well, and they all walked inside. They were a little late because Anko was feigning sickness, so they were the last ones to arrive. Once they arrived at the room they would be playing at, Anko took note of the young glasses-wearing shinobi that seemed to be the dealer of this game. He had his Konohagakure headband plate attached to a bandana. He was currently shuffling the cards, and looked up to see Anko and Naruto. He was aware of Naruto being of high importance, but refused to believe it, as the boy was just a ruffian in his eyes, and so glared at the boy. Plus, as far as he knew, or cared, the boy was the fox. What more was there to him than that? The clan heads all looked at Anko and Naruto upon noticing them, and took in Anko's appearance. Hiruzen had told them all that Anko was sick, and could not play, so Naruto would be taking her spot. They were alright with allowing Anko to play, as she was the clan head of the Uzumaki clan at the moment, but they weren't sure about letting Naruto play, though. Hiruzen told them to let the boy have his fun, and to let him play. They relented to the Hokage's request, some of them reluctantly. Fugaku didn't see the point in letting a boy play a game clearly meant for adults, but he had to humor Hiruzen for a little while longer, so he agreed to let Naruto stay. Sim didn't see any harm in it, and neither did Choza. Shibi didn't really say anything on the matter, and, as usual, was indifferent. Inoichi was on the fence about it, but eventually agreed, as well. Shikaku seemed to be the only one curious about the whole thing, but believed it was too troublesome to argue over. "Anko," Hiruzen said calmly, "what are you doing here? I believe you should be at home resting." Anko shook her head, and looked at all of the clan heads, including Naruto, who had taken a seat in between Shibi and Choza. "I just walked him over here. I'll watch a game or two before heading back home," she told them, coughing to make her act seem more believable. Hiruzen was quiet for a moment before he nodded. "Okay, but I do believe that you should head home soon. It isn't good to be walking around when you're sick, especially with how sick you are at the moment." Anko nodded back, and remained silent, walking over to Tsum, and whispering something audible only to her sensitive ears. "I wouldn't bet too much if I were you," she said in a clear and quiet voice, betraying her sickly appearance. Tsum nodded only slightly, getting wind of what was going on. "If you're all ready to play?" Ebisu asked, getting everyone's attention. The clan heads nodded all around the table at the same time, with Naruto being the last one to nod. Ebisu then proceeded to deal out 2 cards to everyone. Everyone took their cards, and looked around at one another. Everyone had their poker faces on, except for Naruto, who showed a wide range of emotion. Hiruzen, who sat next to Ebisu, was quiet. He was thinking over his cards, and came to a decision. 300 ryo. He told everyone, putting the amount of money he specified onto the table. Ionikai then doubled the amount, and everyone put 600 ryo down onto the table. "Your all-seeing eyes can help you this time," Choza said confidently, getting glares from both of the users in the room. "I don't need my Bikugan to see that you're bluffing." "Hi," she said with his usual calm, and almost monotonous tone of voice. Choza calmed down, and took another glance at his cards. He had an alright hand, but he'd have to figure out a way to get the others to fold before he was forced to. The game went on, and in the 4th round, only Hiruzen, Shikaku, Fukaku, and Naruto were remaining. Sim decided to quit the round when the first 3 cards were put down, as she wanted to just watch Naruto, but still make a contribution to the pot. Choza had to fall back on the same round that Sim did, and Inoichi, and Shibi, folded on the previous round, due to bad cards being put on the table. Shikaka, Herzuin said, getting the man's attention. If you're as smart as I have believed you to be, then you would be better off folding. The same for you, Naruto. Shikaka was silent, but Naruto shook his head in denial. I'm not backing down, GG. I have this game in the bag, he said, grinning. Shikaka was silent for another moment before sighing, and sliding his cards forward. I fold, he stated, as Ebisu collected his cards. They had started on a rather high bet, and it wasn't worth going through all of this if he knew that he had small chances of actually winning. Hayashi, Fugaku, and Hiruzen were all sure that Naruto wasn't entirely sure what he was doing, but were all rather surprised to find out that in the showdown, Naruto had the best hand out of all four of them. Anko collected the money that he had won in that game, and headed home. While surprised, most of the clan heads steeled their resolve by assuring themselves that Naruto's win was just up to chance, a fluke, and that the boy lacked any actual skill. Sim was the only one really sure that Naruto did have some skill in the game, along with a little luck. Despite what she thought, she was wrong. Naruto had a lot of luck. For the rest of the night, Naruto won every game that he participated in. He stayed out of one game by choice so he could count how much money he had gathered from playing poker. The final game of the night, however, took an interesting turn. They had each only brought a set amount of money, and had not predicted that they would have lost everything they brought to a 6-year-old child. To make up for it, they had bet their clothes, and even knowledge. Everyone in the room except for Naruto and Ebisu were only in their underwear and headbands, all of them looking at each other with tired and angered expressions. Well, except when people looked at Hiruzen. After all, underneath his robes and pants, he apparently hid a secret, adult diapers. When he had revealed them, he had hid his face in his hands, saying, quite loudly, and obviously in shame, "They are because of my bowels losing control in my old age," before glaring at everyone. Needless to say, every time someone looked in his direction, snickering, or even a snort of laughter could be heard. To think, the great third Hokage had bowel control issues, and yet was still one of the greatest ninja in the land, albeit one who would occasionally shit himself from time to time. It was just Naruto and Fugaku now, and the man couldn't be more enraged. He couldn't believe how this boy had beat him in every game of poker he played that night. Naruto was still betting money, while he had to resort to other things to continue betting. The Uchiha clan head had an ugly scowl on his normally stoic face. He looked around to the other clan heads to see how they were holding up to the wrath of the Uzumaki boy. Hayashi was just as angered as he was, given that they were the heads of the two most prideful clans in Konoha. The pale-eyed man had even pulled some of his hair out in rage. Shikaku had a bored, an angry look on his face, and at this point he ceased to care about the game. Inoichi had a hard scowl, and was focusing on every aspect of Naruto to see how he was winning, and what his tells were. Choza continually looked around, trying to think of something else other than this game that had gone oh so wrong. Sim looked extremely bored, but was rather interested in how Naruto had won. She had tried to bet the least amount possible each and every game, but she still ended up like everyone else, naked and confused. Hiruzen was tired, and hoped that this was all just a bad dream. After all, his greatest secret and shame had been revealed, his diapers. It would no doubt be the talk of Konoha by the next day. The Hokage who shits himself, as Naruto had collected his Hokage robes and hat. Shibi was the scariest looking of them all, as without his cloak and glasses, he appeared to be an extremely thin man with absolutely no fat, and all muscle, and had almost black eyes that appeared as black orbs surrounded by the whites of his eyes. While he did make several of his bugs go away, as to not scare and unnerve Naruto, there still were quite a few bugs crawling around his body, plus the holes the bugs used to enter and exit his body, which was just plain creepy. Fugaku, you should probably give up while you still have your underwear, Inoichi suggested, but the suggestion was denied by Fugaku, as he furiously shook his head and glared at Naruto. I will not lose to this boy, he started rather loudly. But what are you going to bet? Choza asked, thinking about what Fugaku could possibly use to bet with now that they had lost everything they had on them or brought with them to this game's night. Fugaku was silent, as he didn't really know what he could bet. Then, a mad idea came to his head, as he smirked in such a way that it almost scared Naruto. It was very unlike his usual self, and the other clan leaders were starting to worry about the Uchiha head. Everything or nothing, Naruto, he told the boy, getting his attention. You bet everything you have earned tonight, and I will bet the knowledge of every single one that the Uchiha family has stolen since its foundation, including Uchiha techniques. Okay, boy? It was clear that Fugaku wasn't thinking clearly, but he wasn't listening to anyone other than Naruto. You got a deal, Naruto responded without hesitating. Fugaku's smirk grew, as he was seriously considering using his Sharingan to see what Naruto had, but that would mean that he would be disqualified for using his, thus owing Naruto the knowledge of everything his clan had stolen with their eyes. Fugaku assured himself that Naruto couldn't win again because of all of the times he had won that night already. Fugaku refused to back down, and while he didn't have the best hand in the world, he was sure that it was leagues better than whatever Naruto had. He had tried everything that he could to make the boy fold, but had had no luck whatsoever. When it was time for the reveal, Fugaku and Naruto showed their cards, and everyone was truly surprised. 2 kings, 1 of clubs, and 1 of hearts, 10 of clubs, 3 of spades, and 7 of diamonds were on the table. Fugaku had a 9 of clubs, and a 7 of hearts, and Naruto had a king of diamonds, and a 10 of spades. Naruto had won. Nobody in the room could believe it. A 6-year-old had beaten Fugaku, and made him lose his mind, at a game. Now, the clan leader of the Uchiha clan had been knocked down several pegs, and had to give every that the Sharingan had stolen since the creation of the clan, including his own clan techniques, to a 6-year-old child. If he refused, he would be called out by the other clan heads, and the Hokage, publicly too, and people would question the honor and integrity of the Uchiha clan. And if they questioned that, they would question everything else the clan was doing, more so than they were already. However, Fugaku could take some solace in the fact that many would be laughing at Hiruzen behind his back now. After all, it would be hard not to laugh at a Hokage who, while able to control his ninja, was unable to control one of his body's basic functions, and would be the laughing stock of the elemental nations before long. While they would still respect his strength and power, they would also crack and make jokes about him for his failing bowels. Soon after the game, Kurenai came by the Sarutobi clan compound to pick up Naruto. She had to be the one to do it, because the ruse would have been broken if Anko had come to take Naruto home. Kurenai walked to the door and knocked on it. She waited patiently for a short moment before the door opened. On the other side was none other than Asuma Sarutobi. "Oh, hello Asuma," Kurenai said politely, stuttering for a moment, not expecting for her longtime crush to be suddenly standing before her. "Hi Kurenai. What do you need?" "It's a little late, you know," he told her, scratching the beard that he was growing. "I'm here to pick up Naruto and bring him back to his home. Since Anko's sick, she can't do it, and it's my job, as his godmother, to make sure he gets home safe," she said with a calm smile, trying to use the responsible godparent card just enough to impress Asuma. Asuma nodded with slightly wide eyes, surprised at the news that Kurenai was Naruto's godmother. "I see. That's really nice of you to take care of the kid when his mom is too sick to do so. He's really an interesting kid from what I saw tonight." Speaking of tonight, Kurenai changed topics slightly. How was poker night between the clan heads? Asuma was dead silent. He wasn't really sure what to tell her, and instead moved aside and motioned for her to come in. "It's probably best if you just come in and see," he told her, trailing off into silence, as he guided her to the room where everyone was. "Why would you say that? He's only 6, and nothing bad could." She stopped speaking upon seeing all of the clan heads in the room. Hayashi's hair was messy and frizzled, not to mention missing large clumps here and there. He clearly looked aggravated, and he was almost entirely naked, save for the fact he was wearing, surprisingly, a pair of boxers that had the Hyuga clan symbol on them. The same could be said for a majority of the clan heads, with the exception of Tsum, Shibi, and Shikamaru. "What happened here?" she asked in shock and mild horror, looking at Naruto, who wore the Hokage's hat and Shibi's glasses. He also had a large pile of various clothes around him, and a rather large stack of money in front of him on the table too. "I won," Naruto said joyously, looking at his godmother with a confident face. Tsum nodded, clearly unfazed by the fact that she, and most of the other people in the room, were almost completely nude. "The kid won every game." "Every game?" Kurenai echoed, but with emphasis on the first word, getting nods from everyone in the room, including Fugaku, who looked like someone had shit on his food before feeding it to him. Tsum then smiled, remembering Naruto's most recent prize. "Naruto, tell Kurenai what Fugaku has to give you because you beat him." Her smile turned into a mad grin/smirk you would see on a madman who just won the dream, as she watched Fugaku regain his composure, trying to no longer look like the madman he was only mere minutes before. Before Naruto could speak, Fugaku cleared his throat, obviously frustrated and angry both at himself and Naruto, getting Kurenai to look at him. "In my enraged state, I bet the entire collection that the Sharingan has acquired since the beginning of the clan, as well as access to use any Uchiha that he can use without the Sharingan. Because of the unfortunate case that not all members of the Uchiha clan can awaken the Sharingan, we have all of the we've taken written down. They will be copied and you will get the original writings of each, while we will keep the copies," he explained calmly, though obviously holding back his fury. Kurenai was speechless. It was like Naruto was the embodiment of some god of luck. Since the Sharingan couldn't copy Kekkei, Naruto could use all of them, as long as he practiced them enough, and knew how to properly use elemental chakra. "I got all of this stuff," Naruto told Kurenai once more, bringing her attention back to the real world. Kurenai then looked back at the naked clan heads, and looked at Naruto. "Naruto, please give them back their clothes," she asked him in a rather stern tone, telling him that he was to give them back their clothes. "Kurenai-san," he whined, getting a stern look from Kurenai. He pouted and nodded. "Fine." Shibi raised his hand, and looked at Kurenai, his revealed eyes scaring her just the slightest bit. "He won them fairly, and we are ninja. It would be easy to get to our homes quickly without being noticed." He then cracked the smallest of smiles. "The one who cannot escape being seen would be Hokage-sama. Considering that we are already inside his home, and many people have walked in on the game to see how it was going." Kurenai shook her head with a smile, and waved her hands in front of her. "But you all should have your clothes back," she told them, getting Tsum to shake her head. "It isn't like we don't have several more of the exact same outfit." "We're fine, Kurenai," she told the other woman with a smile. Besides, it was hilarious to find out Hiruzen wears a diaper. She finished with a grin, getting Kurenai to sigh, as she knew it would be pointless to argue with all of these clan heads. "Come on, Naruto. I'll help you take all of this back." Naruto nodded to Kurenai, carrying as much as he could in his little arms. Kurenai sealed the money into a scroll, and held the rest of his winnings in her arms. The room cleared out rather quickly, with the exception of Fugaku. "Naruto-san," he said calmly, getting Naruto and Kurenai's attention. "I expect to see you at the Uchiha compound soon. I am a man of my word, and while I did make the bet in an unfocused state, we both agreed to the terms, and I lost," he told the boy, getting Naruto to nod with a smile. Fugaku nodded back, and disappeared from the room in a blur. It was clear that he was not happy with the terms, but they had both agreed to the bet, and they had done so in front of all of the clan heads, and the Hokage himself, witnessing the agreement, so he was unable to go back on his word, at least not without consequences he could not afford to face. Naruto and Kurenai left shortly after, having nothing else to do at the Sarutobi compound. They had found out that the woman that Naruto saw when he first arrived was the sister of Asuma, and the child in her arms was named Konohamaru, named after the village they lived in. The two arrived at Naruto's house to see Anko relaxing on the couch watching something on the television. Anko looked at the two for a moment before having to do a double take. She took note of the glasses, and the Hokage robe, and hat that Naruto had on. Anko smiled, and laughed, leaving her spot on the couch to pick up her child, and toss him into the air. "That's my boy. Made them run out of money so they had to bet other things." He laughed along with her, and hugged Anko, getting her to hug back. Kurenai smiled at Anko hugging Naruto, as she set the scroll with all of the money down on the table in front of the couch. "He's won allegiance from all of the clans, and is being given the entire library stolen by the Sharingan. Powerful, ancient, and Kurenai yelled in excitement, and suddenly realized, even deadly. "Naruto, please let me see those when you get them," she begged, even going so far as to use the dreaded Nomi Jutsu. She knew it was low to use that on her godson, but hey, she was the Genjutsu mistress of Konoha. She had a reputation to uphold, plus a love of, and she would be damned if she didn't want to look at the sheer number of that the Uchiha clan had acquired over the years, if not centuries, and now they were in her godson's control, or, at least, they soon would be. However, she was also wanting to see what kind of dangerous the Sharingan stole in all of its years of use. Learning them was a bonus, sure, but just seeing them would be good too. "Sure, you can use them," Naruto said happily, secretly fearing the Nomi his godmother had just used. Besides, she was family to him, and he knew that he was going to share all of the he was going to get with his family. Little did he know, his growing collection wouldn't stop at the Uchiha's collection, and would span across the libraries of 2 other clans, eventually totaling at 3 whole clans' libraries of, into 1 family library of. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.